Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto returns to the past after his teammates cause the destruction of Konoha part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto woke up finding himself in an apartment he hadn't been in at least 10 years. Kyu-kun. How far back did you send us? Naruto waited a few seconds before his tenant replied. 12 years exactly, Kid Naruto pondered for a moment, quickly doing the math. That means today is the day we get sorted out into our teams, Naruto sighed before glancing at his alarm clock. 5 a.m. Sigh, better get up. Naruto moved towards the familiar bathroom and got ready to take a shower. His mind wandered on the recent events that played in his mind. Sighing again, Naruto shut off the water and stepped out of the shower, drying himself off and moved towards his closet to meet a sea of orange. Naruto groaned and shuddered. Kyuubi rolled around in his cage laughing. I forgot about these, oh man, damn villagers, trying to get me killed. Naruto sighed for the millionth time this morning and put on a simple black t-shirt and the orange pants of his attire. Leaving his jacket, Naruto grabbed his frog wallet and stepped out of the apartment, walking down the streets of Konoha, which were empty. Naruto went around searching for some decent clothing, having found out a long time ago that the villagers were still asleep in the mornings and didn't pay attention to what they were doing or who exactly came in and out of their shop. The blonde entered shops with ease and without worry of being cursed at or having things thrown at him. He strolled around the shop looking for simple yet comfortable and effective shinobi clothing. In the end he got a pair of Anbu pants, a sleeveless plain red top, gathering 5 more of the same type of clothing. He paid for the clothing and continued his way down the road towards, in his opinion, one of the best weaponry shops in Konoha. Upon entering the store he was bombarded by Konoha's finest pieces of weaponry, all sorts of kunais, handless and twin-bladed, as well as Fuma shuriken, Dai shuriken and the standard academy shuriken. Trench knives and metal wires filled the shelves, as well as exploding notes, smoke bombs, weapon scrolls, weights of all sizes, soldier pills and makibishi, senbon needles. The walls were practically painted with swords and katana of all sizes and styles, and that was only a quarter of what was in the shop. Naruto smiled to himself and went around the shop gathering new weaponry, gathering all he needed. He paid for the items and left the shop and headed back to his apartment with a smile on his face. Naruto unlocked the apartment door and moved towards his dressing table and pulled out a needle and some gold thread. He picked through the bags of new items and pulled out all of his red shirts. Grabbing one, he quickly set to work glancing at the clock every now and then. Finishing, he set the red shirt down on his bed and admired his work. Naruto smirked. The plain red shirt now had gold embroidering around the sides and edges, and right in the middle was a golden shadow of a fox, its 9 tails flying freely behind it. The creature's body low as if ready to pounce and one front leg in front of the other, growling at an unknown predator. Naruto pulled the shirt on, then the pants. He gathered his weapons and set them in the many pockets he had. He put a genjutsu on the pockets so that all the weapons appeared not to be there. He put his forehead protector around his neck, pulled his now black shinobi sandals on and moved towards his wardrobe, gathering all his orange jumpsuits and dumping them on the floor before using a simple kaiten jutsu to incinerate them all. Moving back towards the closet, he pulled out a long white cloak with red flames coming out of the bottom. I remember Oji-san gave me this, Naruto sighed and pulled it on. Taking another glance at the clock, he found it was still early. Shrugging, Naruto made his way across rooftops towards the academy, slowly taking his time and taking in the soft breeze that made its way through his hair and made his cloak fly behind him. Landing at the entrance, he moved towards his classroom and took his usual seat at the classroom. Being the first one here, he put his feet up on the table, leaned back on his chair and closed his eyes, falling into a light sleep. What seemed like seconds later, he woke up by a chakra signature coming towards the room. Closing his eyes again, Naruto heard the sound of a door sliding open and then a crash almost immediately followed. Naruto opened a lazy eye and saw Iruka standing there shocked and a little flustered. Naruto grinned his usual flashy grin. Heyo, Iruka-sensei. Naruto said in his unusually loud voice. Iruka, regaining composure, smiled back at Naruto and returned the greeting. Heyo, Naruto-kun. Iruka's eyes wandered over Naruto's new wardrobe and fixed his eyes on the golden 9-tailed fox that Naruto engraved into the shirt. His eyes widened then softened. He let a small smile creep over his features. Naruto gave him a grin and then went back to relaxing, leaving Iruka to do whatever it was he did. It wasn't long before the whole class was filled with students. Iruka stepped out of the class again to tend to some business he had. Many were looking at Naruto wondering why he was there, others wondering about his new wardrobe. Naruto was getting a little annoyed at being the center of attention and hearing the whispers that went around the room. It was not until Shikamaru approached him that the whispers stopped and everyone listened. Oi, Naruto, what the hell are you doing here? Only those who have passed are supposed to be here. Naruto opened an eye and looked up at the Nara. Look at the forehead protector, genius. Shikamaru resumed his usual can't-be-bothered stance troublesome and walked away. Just then the door burst open, and two girls fought to get through the door, both entering. The pink-haired Kunoichi exclaimed, "Ha! I beat you, Ino pig." The blonde girl turned to face her rival and ex-best friend. "No way, forehead girl, my toe entered before you and your forehead did." Naruto scowled upon the arrival of the pink-haired girl, suppressing a strong amount of killer intent intended for the girl, and went back to resting, that is until said girl came rushing towards him. "Boy, Naruto baka, move your ass, I want to sit next to Sasuke-kun." Naruto looked next to him and indeed there was Sasuke brooding as usual, raising an eyebrow. Naruto closed his eyes and went back to his daydreaming, ignoring the fact that nearly every girl in the class was in front of both him and Sasuke fighting over who was going to sit down next to their Sasuke-kun. That is they were until Sakura sent out a killer intent that could scare the Hokage away. All the girls scattered and Sakura turned to claim her prize, only to find Naruto in the way. "Naruto, move, I want to sit next to Sasuke-kun," she screamed. Naruto cringed at the level of her voice, but made no sign that he was moving anytime soon. This unfortunately did not sit too well with Sakura. "Naruto baka. Move." Naruto continued to ignore her until she snapped. Sakura moved to punch Naruto. Naruto lifted his arm lazily and caught the punch. He got a good hold on her hand, almost crushing it. He opened his eyes to reveal the coldest blue eyes in the world. "Don't touch me." His voice dripped with hate and anger, it sounded almost demonic. "If your oversized forehead hasn't deterred your capability of seeing, then you wouldn't have trouble seeing an empty chair on the other side of the brooding team." Sasuke scowled at the comment. "Also, if you don't quiet down, I'm pretty sure that everyone present will go deaf because of your unnatural banshee-like voice," he said in a teasing tone. Sakura looked about to be on the verge of tears. Everyone was quiet and now staring at Naruto in shock. Naruto by now had let go of Sakura and had gone back to daydreaming and reminiscing. It wasn't until Iruka came in and told Sakura to sit down that everything went back to normal. Iruka congratulated everyone for graduating and started setting them into their teams. Team 1 Naruto tuned out after that, knowing what Iruka was going to say. He went back into a sitting position and laid his head down on the desk. Team 7 Haruno Sakura. Sakura lifted her head. "Uchiha Sasuke." Sasuke didn't care. Sakura went into her fangirl mode and Uzumaki Naruto. Everyone looked over to Naruto to see how he would react. Sakura looked over at Naruto in anger. Naruto, however, didn't show any sign that he had heard. That was probably because he was asleep. The class sweat dropped. "Naruto. Pay attention." Naruto opened his eyes and looked his sensei sleepily. "Did you say something, Iruka-sensei?" Everyone fell of their chairs and then regained their composure just as quickly. "Naruto. Pay attention when I'm talking to you." Iruka screamed, only to find that Naruto had fallen asleep again. Iruka turned red from anger and threw a chalk duster at Naruto. Upon instinct Naruto dodged the duster without effort, shocking many. Nah, I'm up." Naruto mumbled something the rest of the class couldn't hear and went back to his seat. "Now, as I was saying, Naruto, you're on team 7 and your teammates will be Haruno Sakura and Uchiha Sasuke." Everybody was ready for a reaction from the blonde male, but were surprised when none came. Many, thinking that the blonde had fallen asleep again, turned to look at him, but were surprised when they saw he was still awake. After a minute of silence, Iruka moved on with the other teams, Naruto still having everyone's attention. "Alright everyone, wait here for your jounin instructors," Iruka said as he left the classroom. Not long after every student had been taken by their instructors, except Team 7, an hour passed, and still their sensei hadn't shown, not that Naruto had expected any better. Getting fed up of waiting, Naruto exited the classroom from the window and jumped, Sasuke and Sakura running to the window, wondering what the hell the blonde was thinking, only to see him running down the side of the building and soon jumping over the rooftops out of sight. "Damn that stupid sensei of mine. What the hell is it with him and keeping a reputation of coming late of all things?" Naruto headed for the cemetery where he knew his sensei was. When Naruto arrived at the cemetery, he indeed found his sensei there. The silvered-haired man was looking over a tombstone. Naruto sighed, making his presence known. He walked over to his sensei, who looked up. Naruto kept walking, knowing his sensei would recognize him immediately. He grabbed Kakashi by the back of his shirt and began dragging him back towards the academy. Kakashi, being confused as to how his student found him, shrugged and pulled out a little orange book, which made him giggle a perverted giggle. It was like that the whole way through the village. They entered the academy and then opened the classroom door to find a still brooding Sasuke and a fangirlish Sakura. Both looked up when they heard the door open. Naruto came in, dragging Kakashi behind him. Naruto let go of Kakashi, who dropped to the floor, still giggling. Kakashi got off of the floor and put the book away. He turned to face his students. He set his eyes on a fuming Sakura, brooding, but equally fuming Sasuke and a bored-looking Naruto. Kakashi studied his students with an upturned U of an eye, indicating had he was smiling. How can I say this? My first impression of you is both." Sasuke and Sakura waited to hear what he was going to say, but immediately fell face first when they heard it. "I don't like you. Naruto just snorted and gave a huge grin. Kakashi smiled back at Naruto. "Meet me up on the roof with that." Kakashi poofed away. Naruto walked out of the door towards the door. Taking the stairs up, he heard Sasuke and Sakura behind him. Once they were all settled down, Kakashi was sitting down in front of his students. Sasuke was sitting in between Naruto and Sakura. Naruto was on Sasuke's right and Sakura was on his left. Okay, let's begin with some introductions. Sakura, with great effort, tore her eyes away from Sasuke and faced her teacher. "What do you want to know?" she asked. "How about your likes, dislikes, dreams for the future, hobbies, stuff like that? How about you go first, Sensei, and show us?" Sakura said in her oh so innocent voice. "Oh, me? My name is Kakashi. I have many likes and dislikes. Dreams for the future, well, I have a lot of hobbies." All we learnt was his name ran through Sasuke's and Sakura's heads. Naruto's was along the lines of, "I wonder if I still have my ramen coupons, ramen chibi." Naruto drools. "Okay, Pinky, you first." Sakura ignored the comment and introduced herself. "My name is Hinuro Sakura. The thing I like is glances at Sasuke. Well, the person I like is glances at Sasuke again. My dream for the future is looks at Sasuke again and squeals like a fangirl. I hate Naruto baka." Naruto ignored her. "My hobby," she went on and never finished since she looked at Sasuke and squealed a squeal that trolled all others. The rest of Team 7 had massive raindrops appear on the back of their heads as Sakura went into her fangirl mode. "Yay. I get a fangirl, next thing you know we're all dead on our first mission," Kakashi thought dully. "Alright, you the brooding one next." Sasuke glared at Kakashi but went on to introduce himself. "My name is Sasuke. There are tons of things I dislike, but I don't really like anything, and I don't really want to use the word dream, but more of an ambition, the resurrection of my clan, and to kill a certain man." "I thought as much." "Cool, idiot." "Okay, you next." Blondie Kakashi had been looking forward to Naruto's introduction ever since Naruto had found him. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. My likes are ramen. My dislikes are the 3 minutes you have to wait for ramen to cook. My hobbies are training, reading, cooking, and pranks. My dream is also sort of an ambition." Now having Kakashi's attention, Naruto continued, "I need to stop a certain snake from blowing out a precious light, kill the same certain snake with the help of a certain frog, slug and monkey, also save a cherry blossom, raven and leaf from its own darkness, and become the best Hokage ever." Kakashi's visible eye narrowed and the 3 genin didn't miss it, but they said nothing on the matter. "No way, he couldn't mean what I think he means. How does he even know of them? And who could he want to save from Orochimaru?" he said. "Precious. So that means someone close to him." Also Cherry Blossom glances at Sakura, Raven glances at Sasuke and Leaf. "I need to talk to Hokage-sama about this." Kakashi tore away from his musing and turned his attention to the 3 genins. "Okay, that's enough introductions. We start our duties tomorrow, but before that we are going to do something, just the 4 of us, survival training." "What? Didn't we do enough training in the academy already?" Sakura said. Peeved Kakashi started laughing. "Why are you laughing all of a sudden?" Sakura said, starting to get confused. Had she missed something? Kakashi started laughing a bit harder. A tick appeared above her brow. "Apparently so." "No, well, it's just that when you hear this you're probably going to flip. Of the 29 graduates, only 9 will be chosen to be genin, the rest will go back to the academy. This training is super difficult exam with a failure rate of over 66%. Sakura went frozen in shock and disbelief. Sasuke got out of his brooding state and looked at his sensei for any signs that he was joking and was sorely disappointed. And Naruto, he was asleep and snoring. Kakashi sweat dropped, as did the others. "Naruto baka, wake up." Sakura went to hit Naruto when Naruto stopped it, nearly crushing it. Again, in the process Sakura winced, trying to pull her hand away. "I told you before, Hinuro, don't touch me again or I will kill you," Naruto said in the same tone he used in the classroom. Kakashi's eyes narrowed so much that they were almost slits. Naruto was releasing a lot of killer intent for a mere fresh genin. Sasuke found himself jealous of the dope's power. Sakura was frozen in fear. She nodded as best she could, shaking uncontrollably. Naruto let go of her and stood up, walking away. Kakashi shook himself from his shock and called after Naruto, who kept walking. "Meet us at the training grounds tomorrow and don't eat breakfast, you'll throw up." Naruto kept walking but put up a hand saying that he heard what his sensei had said. Kakashi turned to his other students who were still a bit shaken. "That goes for you guys too," he said, then left, jumping over rooftops and out of sight. Sasuke got up and walked away. Before Sakura knew it, she was alone. She got up and ran away, probably to find Sasuke. Naruto and Kakashi came into view as soon as Sakura was out of sight. "Mind telling me what's going on?" Kakashi asked. Naruto eyed Kakashi. "You're probably one of the few people I can trust, so yes, I will tell you, but not here." Kakashi raised a brow. "Okay, where?" Naruto motioned for the older man to follow him. Naruto led him through the streets of Konoha to his apartment. Kakashi noticed that the apartment wasn't anywhere near where a child should live, but noticed that Naruto didn't mind, so he didn't say anything. Naruto led the way upstairs and towards a door on the 3rd floor at the end of the hallway. Kakashi took in his surroundings and found that the room was anything but in good condition. The paint on the walls were peeling, and there were cracks in certain places of the ceiling that made you think that it was going to come down on them. There were signs that the apartment had been on fire at some point, the ceiling was leaking water, it was small and cramped, the living room, bedroom and kitchen were all linked in one very cramped L-shaped room, and there was a small hallway that led to the bathroom. Kakashi winced at the bad living conditions and wondered what it was like to live in these living conditions for as long as you can remember. Kakashi shuddered at the thought, however pushed the thoughts away and looked at Naruto who was looking at him smirking. "Not pretty, is it?" he said. Kakashi opened his mouth to apologize, but Naruto waved him off. "Don't worry Kakashi-sensei, anyone else who came through that door would say the same." Kakashi nodded and walked in following Naruto. The time traveler closed the door. All the windows did a couple of hand seals, but the genin did it too fast for even Kakashi to see. Naruto turned back to Kakashi and motioned him to sit down, which he did. "Alright, what do you want to know?" Kakashi cocked his head to the side, then straightened up a bit and said everything. Naruto simply nodded and began explaining everything, from being Hokage to Sakura and Sasuke betraying the village, resulting in its downfall. Kakashi absorbed all his information. "So let me get this straight, you are really the 25-year-old Hokage, Naruto, and you already know about Kyuubi." Naruto nodded, so Kakashi continued. "Orochimaru is going to put a seal on Sasuke that will make him power hungry and want to seek out Orochimaru to gain that power and betray the village during the upcoming Chunin exams." Naruto nodded again. "When that happens, Hokage-sama is going to die by the hands of his student, Orochimaru, who is now in charge of the village of the Sound and allied with the Sand that are both going to attack the village. But due to you having connections, Suna and Konoha are going to be allied in the future." Naruto nodded. "You go with Jiraiya for a couple of weeks to seek out the new Hokage who turns out to be Tsunade. You manage to convince her to come and be Hokage." Naruto nodded. "Almost immediately after that, Sasuke betrays the village and you go on a 2.5-year training trip with Jiraiya the Toad Sannin. During that time you find out that the Kyuubi's chakra is slowly killing you and that a group called Akatsuki is after you and all Biju containers." Naruto nodded. "When Orochimaru tried to take over Sasuke's body, Sasuke killed him and sought out a group of people to help him kill Itachi. Sasuke succeeded in doing that but still didn't return to Konoha. Instead he took over Sound and declared war on Konoha. Konoha was winning when Sakura betrayed Konoha and gave out vital information to Sasuke, which resulted in Konoha's downfall and everyone's except yours death, and due to this Kyuubi sent you back in time to fix things." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, pretty much." They sat there in silence for a moment or two when Kakashi finally opened his mouth to speak. That's a whole lot to take in and not even remotely possible to believe." Naruto nodded again, not saying a word. "Then do you expect me to believe this?" Naruto sighed. "I don't expect you to do anything, Kakashi-san, but you can't deny the fact that I know things about this village no teenager should. Also, my knowledge of jutsus is far beyond what any genin could even hope to surpass. Not only that, but I can show you that I have in fact met Jiraiya in the well that I've met him." Naruto said, a little confused. Kakashi cocked his head to the side in confusion. "Oh, and what can you possibly do to make me believe that you are actually 25 years old and Hokage?" Naruto smirked and got out of his chair and stood in front of Kakashi. Naruto stuck his hand out in front of Kakashi and formed a perfect blue spinning orb. Kakashi's eyes widened. He pulled his forehead protector up and used his Sharingan to see if it was actually real or not. Kakashi, after a few minutes hours of examining the perfectly shaped Rasengan in Naruto's hand, slipped his forehead protector down, covering his eye again and nodded. Kakashi sighed and took in all the information, again replaying what Naruto had said. "Does Hokage-sama know about this?" he asked, still processing the information. Naruto nodded. Kakashi sighed and rubbed his face, maybe in hope that all his new worries about the future will just disappear and he would wake up in his bed late for work again. Kakashi pulled his hand away from his face and saw Naruto was still there looking at him. He sighed again. "So given that your current teammates both betrayed you and the village for their own selfish deeds which resulted in the destruction of Konoha, I suppose your teamwork with them will plummet so low that it would go where even demons wouldn't go," Kakashi said. Naruto looked at him amused. "I guess you would be right in supposing that," but Kakashi looked at Naruto with a glint hope in his eyes. "What would be the point in coming back and trying to fix things?" Naruto said. A small smile graced Kakashi's face. Even though covered by the mask on his face, Naruto still saw through it and gave him a smile of his own in return. "But that doesn't mean I don't have to make their lives a living hell." Naruto's face split into a massive grin only he and a certain other blonde could manage. Both males stayed like that talking for hours about Naruto's experiences and pastfuturi until Kakashi sighed a tired smile. Both figures stayed where they were talking until sunrise, finally noticing the time. Kakashi looked out the window. Naruto looked outside with Kakashi. "Kakashi-san, if I am not careful I might inherit your habit of being late." Kakashi chuckled a bit, Naruto joining in. They both settled down a bit. Naruto's face soon turned serious. Kakashi gave Naruto his full attention. Naruto turned towards him, his piercing blue eyes staring directly in his eyes and seemed to go further, looking into his very soul. Kakashi summoned all his might not to let a shiver escape his spine. "But you know Kakashi," he said, still looking at him. His voice was deep, soothing, yet strict and commanding. It unnerved Kakashi to see his student so serious. Not once in his life has he seen anyone so serious. "You have to be able to move on sometime. Obito-san, Rin-san and Otu-san are all gone, and I'm pretty sure they'll want you to focus on the present and not the past." Kakashi's eyes widened, then reverted back to its normal state. He looked down and said nothing. He stood still. When he looked back up, his uncovered eye was in an upturned U shape. He nodded to Naruto, who smiled and reverted back to his happy-go-lucky state, and Yash. "Let's go before Sakura beats the shit out of both of us," Naruto shouted, pumping his hand in the air. Kakashi sweat dropped at the thought and nodded. Naruto was about to leave when Naruto turned to face his sensei. "How strong are you?" Kakashi asked once he had the blonde's attention. Naruto's face blew up into a full-grown grin. "I surpassed my father," was all he said. Kakashi's eye widened but softened before saying, "Guess that's why I gave you the nickname, the most unpredictable ninja ever, nah?" Kakashi said with his own grin, which Naruto happily returned. "Go easy on me with the exam?" Kakashi asked hopefully, but was shot down when Naruto gave a cheeky smile. "I'll give you a piece of advice, don't underestimate them before simply poofing out of existence." Kakashi sighed before following the other's lead. To say Sasuke was pissed was an understatement. Not only was their sensei late, but so was that PMSing bundle of joy. Sakura was staring at him like there was no tomorrow, and he was very, very hungry. Sakura, however, didn't seem to notice, making every second with her precious Sasuke count. Sasuke, on the other hand, had to use all self-control not to go off at the pink-haired girl next to him, who was staring openly with little stars in her eyes. Blushing a bit, Sakura gathered all her courage and moved closer to Sasuke. Noticing the action, he glared at her from the corner of his eyes, daring her to move further than she already had. Sakura gulped, understanding. She stopped moving closer and sat up straight, blushing harder as she did every action. "Nah, Sasuke-kun," she said meekly. Sasuke turned to look at her. She had to keep a giggle down. She had Sasuke's attention. She was about to ask him out when two figures came into the clearing. "Cha. How'd the bad timing awards go for you two, baka?" "Worst timing in the world." Sakura, forgetting her blissful time with Sasuke, she directed her attention and all her anger at the two people coming towards them. "You're late," she shrieked at the top of her voice. Birds in the area fled from their homes in the trees. Both Naruto and Kakashi smiled a bit and rubbed their neck. "Gomen, my alarm clock broke and I had to wait for the shops to open so I could get a new one," they both said in union. Sasuke and Sakura sweat dropped, while Naruto and Kakashi looked at each other before shrugging. Naruto made his way under a large tree and sat under it. While doing this, Kakashi took out two small silver bells, both hanging on two strings. Naruto tuned out as Kakashi explained the exercise to Sasuke and Sakura. He racked his brain for ideas, plans, memories, information, seals, jutsus, mappings, but stopped after he got a migraine. Taibi Naruto twirled around in a spot with big swirls in his eyes before collapsing unconscious. "Ready? Begin." Two figures blurred out of existence, while one stayed under the shade of a large oak tree napping. Kakashi sweat dropped. Naruto, the test has begun," he said, but sighed as Naruto kept sleeping, mumbling something incoherent. Sighing again and mumbling something about lazy ninjas, he got out a tiny book and sat down next to Naruto, giggling like a madman. "They're good, but they can be better." Sasuke's up in the trees, while Sakura's under the foliage, yet even though I'm next to him I can barely sense Naruto's presence. "Well, at least I don't have to deal with him." Kakashi sent a curious glance at the young boy next to him. Even though Naruto had proved it, it was still hard to believe that the loudmouth blonde had actually proved everyone wrong. But at the same time he was comforted by the thought of having someone who, through all the hardships the village had given him, still believed in the leaf and valued it more than their own life. Kakashi smiled down at the relaxed sunshine blonde figure next to him. 2 hours later, test went exactly like in the anime, except Naruto wasn't there. An annoying buzzing sounded off into the distance. Naruto sat up groggily, looking to his left. He found his favorite Jounin sensei sitting next to him, reading his holy bible and giggling. Looking closer at the man, he found that Kakashi had bits of dirt, little nicks and scratches all over him. Naruto smirked, knowing exactly what had happened. Chuckling a bit, Kakashi turned to face Naruto. Naruto's smirk got wider. "Didn't I tell you not to underestimate them?" Kakashi narrowed his eyes and mumbled something inaudible. "What was that?" Naruto asked mockingly. "I said I thought you were exaggerating," the Jounin answered, annoyed. Naruto chuckled once again before getting up and headed for the posts. Turning back to his sensei, he said, "Guess it's the pole for me, nah?" With a wide grin, he sat down in front of the middle pole while Kakashi tied him up. "So your plan is to fail this team and wait for them to graduate later in time?" Kakashi asked. Naruto looked at him like he had grown another head. But god no, another year of the academy. No thanks. Naruto shook his head, making his hair even more messed up than it already was. We're going to pass the same way we did last time. Kakashi looked on confused for a second and then it clicked. Kakashi was smirking as he had collected Sasuke and Sakura. Once all four were gathered at the meeting point, Kakashi had gotten the lunches. Setting the lunches down, he faced all three of his students, his visible eye was curved in an upturned U. Well, there's no reason for any of you to go back to the academy, he said in his cheerful voice. Sasuke smirked, Sakura cheered, beaming, thinking she had done an excellent job. Yep, you shouldn't bother, you should all just quit being ninjas. Sasuke's smirk was replaced by anger, Sakura's beaming smile was replaced by disbelief. Naruto, figuring it was time that he started acting a little like the old Naruto, looked up at his sensei in disbelief. What? Why? Okay, we couldn't get the bells, but why do we have to quit? Kakashi faced Naruto, also playing his part but also genuinely interested in what Naruto had in mind. Because all of you are just punks who don't deserve to be ninjas, Kakashi replied smoothly. Sasuke snapped, shooting up. He charged at his sensei. In a blink of an eye, Sasuke was on the ground, his hand held tightly behind his back and his face pressed against the ground under Kakashi's foot. No, don't step on Sasuke-kun, shouted Sakura. Kakashi's face was shadowed, looking up, his expression was deadly. Are you guys underestimating ninjas? Huh? Why do you think you were divided into teams and are doing this training? What does that mean? Sakura asked quietly. Naruto pretended to look confused. Basically, you guys do not understand the answer to this test. Kakashi sighed. Answer? Naruto asked, even more confused than before. Yes, Kakashi turned towards him. The answer that helps you pass this test, he replied. Sakura looked up nervously. So when are you going to tell us? She asked, her confidence shooting down as she said each word. Geez, it's teamwork, the three of you working together might have gotten you the bells. Something seemed to click in Sakura's mind, she laughed bitterly. So the bells were just a decoy, she stated. Kakashi nodded. You guys, I'll give you one more chance, but after lunch I'll make it even tougher. Those who still wish to challenge can eat lunch. But don't give any to Naruto. Naruto looked up. It's punishment for not doing anything productive. If anyone gives him food they will immediately fail. I am the rules here, got it? He said, his face shadowed once more. Kakashi disappeared from his position. Almost immediately afterwards, Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs. I don't need any food. I'm fine. When his stomach growled loudly, Sakura's sweat dropped and Sasuke got his lunch and started eating. Shortly after, Sakura followed his lead. Curse you, Kakashi. Once I get my hands on you I'll. Naruto sighed, that bastard knows he can't do anything to him. Kakashi was a vital part of his plans. A few minutes passed in silence. Naruto's head was down and he looked completely famished. Sasuke, catching a glimpse of Naruto's face, and sighed. Looking away, he offered Naruto his food. Here Sakura's eyes widened, almost choking on her food. Hey, Sasuke-kun. Didn't you just hear Sensei? Sasuke sighed again, he really didn't want to do this. Don't worry, I don't sense him anywhere near here. After lunch we'll work together and get the bells. Without food he'll just be in the way and will only hurt us. Outwardly Naruto looked shocked, but Chibi Naruto was doing the cha-cha. Go Sasuke, Chibi Naruto chanted. Throwing away his maracas, he did his little happy dance. Sakura looked down at her own food, then turning away from Naruto she too held out her bento box. Up in the trees, Kakashi looked at the middle figure. So that was what you meant, eh Naruto? Kakashi chuckled a little before he appeared in front of the three genin. Lightning struck, black clouds gathered, the wind howled. You guys. Sasuke got in a defensive stance. Sakura cowered away and Naruto hid his little smile. Past the wind stopped, the black clouds disappeared, the lightning with it. Sakura and Sasuke looked confused for a second. Kakashi was standing in front of them with a proud smile on his face. Pass. But why? Sakura exclaimed. You guys are the first, everyone else would just do whatever I told them, they were all just morons. A ninja must see underneath the underneath. Those who break the rules and codes of the ninja world are called trash, but do you know what? Those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. That's the end of training. All of you pass, Kakashi said, doing the good guy pose. Sakura and Naruto cheered at becoming ninjas, while Sasuke just settled for a smirk, again. Heading up, Sasuke and Sakura followed Kakashi towards the end of the training ground. Naruto, who was still cheering and gloating about how he was going to become the best ninja, stopped and seemed to realize his situation. Giving a nervous chuckle, he called out to the retreating figures. Hey, come on guys, get back here and untie me. Hey. This isn't funny. Sensei. Sakura-chan. Team. Untie me, you're all going to regret this when I become Hokage. Sensei. Sakura, Sasuke, Naruto and Kakashi were all currently standing in a spacious room. In front of them was a large woman, squeezing the life out of a small cat with a little ribbon on its left ear. Team 7 itself looked like they went through hell and back. They all had a multiple number of cuts and bruises and were also sporting a number of large gashes in their arms and legs. Their cloths were torn and ripped in different areas, their hair was battered and messed up, and it looked like they were barely able to stay straight. Yes, squeeze harder, kill it, destroy it, murder it. Ah. You got what you deserve. But the worst is yet to come, soon, yes, very soon, hee ha 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 bwahaha. Tybee eye twitches, mumbling about murdering something. Good God, it's still alive. When will the torture end? When, goddammit. Team 7 were looking downright murderous, the third and Iruka watched on with large sweat drops on the back of their heads as the four glared daggers at the cat as its owner exited the room. Clearing his throat, the third shuffled through his files, trying to find an appropriate mission for the young shinobi in front of him. Now Team 7, your duty is babysitting an elder's grandson, shopping in a neighboring village, helping with potato digging, and the Hokage shivered finding Tora the cat. Naruto, who had sat patiently up until now, had snapped no. No, no, no. I want to do a more incredible mission, find another one, old man. Kakashi looked thankful. Thank you, Naruto. Sasuke nodded his head in agreement while Sakura, who hadn't seemed to notice Sasuke's action, went on about how annoying Naruto was. You idiot. You are just a rookie. Everyone starts off with simple missions such as these and works their way up. Iruka shouted, Sandaime sighed. But, we keep getting the crappiest possible duties. Naruto argued back, I'm pretty sure this is when we meet Tazuna, all I need to do is act like I did last time, and then I'll get to see everyone including Haku and Zabuza again. This time I'll make sure they won't die. He thought with determination. Kakashi seemed to notice the look on Naruto's face and stayed quite interested on where this was going. Naruto, it seems I have to explain to you what these duties are all about. The Hokage said, sitting up a bit straighter. Listen, each day the village receives numerous requests, from babysitting to assassination. Each request is written on these lists and divided into an A, B, C, D ranking based on difficulty. The village is also divided based on skill, starting with me to the Jounin, Chunin, and Genin. The missions are then handed out by us at the top to ninjas based on their abilities. And if the duty is completed successfully, we receive payment from the client. You guys just became Genin, so D rank missions are perfect for you. When the Hokage looked up, his triumphant smile disappeared, replaced with an irritated look on his face as he found the whole of Team 7 discussing what ramen Naruto should eat later that night. Kakashi actually looked interested in what Naruto was saying and was giving suggestions. A vein popped on Sandaime's temple. Hey, listen. I apologize, Kakashi said, looking flustered. Geez, all you do is give us lectures. But you know what? I'm not the troublemaking brat you still think I am. Naruto shouted back and turned away. Kakashi gazed at Naruto, smiling like there was no tomorrow. Iruka looked on with shock, but smiled afterwards. Sandaime smiled, trusting Naruto's judgment. Okay, he got 3 shocked faces and 1 triumphant smirk. Little brat was expecting this, was all that ran through Kakashi's and Sandaime's minds. Alright, bring him. And 2 Chunin who were watching on the sidelines opened a side door and revealed, my life rests in the hands of these brats. They look like they're barely out of their diapers, especially the short one with the stupid looking face. In front of Team 7 stood a middle-aged scruffy old man, a sake bottle in one hand. The smell of liquor was strong on Naruto's nose. Scrunching his nose in disgust, Naruto pinched his nose. You're no sight for sore eyes either, old man, and lay off the sake, will you? You stink. Naruto said, waving his arm in the air, clearing away the scent. Kakashi giggled a bit, but you wouldn't know whether it was from the book or not. Sandaime tilted his hat down, covering his face, so you wouldn't see his smile. Sakura on the other hand started lecturing, shrieking at Naruto about respecting the client. Naruto just looked at her with a bored expression planted on his face. While Tazuna himself beamed before bursting into laughter, everyone turned his way with a questioning look. Ha, I like this kid. He shouted with laughter, to Sakura's complete and utter disbelief. Naruto beamed, shaking hands with Tazuna. He slung an arm around the blonde's shoulder. So Gaki, do you know any bars, strip clubs, around this joint? He asked slyly. Had he no shame? Went through everyone's minds, except one, that is. Naruto gave a sly smile of his own. You've come to the right, Gaki, Tazuna-san, I know all the bar owners in the village. He said, walking Tazuna to the door. He continued, and I know a few of the strip club joints and they know me, so stick with me and I can get you in for free and get you a couple of bottles of sake on the house. Naruto grinned cheekily. Tazuna's face seemed to light up. Now you're talking. Yosh. Let's go. He slurred, pumping the bottle in the air, showering everyone with the foul-smelling liquid. Naruto didn't mind so much, he was used to the stuff. Moving for the door, it was Iruka who stopped them. And it wasn't a happy Iruka. Naruto gulped a bit. Naruto, he said murderously, his eye twitched a little. Since when do you drink? Naruto looked up at him with a blank expression. What are you talking about, Iruka-sensei? I've been drinking since was 4. In the background you could hear Sakura gasp. Sandaime and Kakashi looked up in shock, they hadn't heard about this. Sasuke just looked curious. Tazuna looked around in surprise. You drink? Aren't you a little young to be drinking? Naruto snorted. I say, old enough to kill, old enough to drink, old enough to fuck. Tazuna nodded, seemed reasonable, to him anyway. Iruka on the other hand, didn't agree so wholeheartedly. Stalking right up to Naruto, he pushed him up onto the wall and looked him dead straight in his crystal blue eyes. Naruto, he said as calmly as he could, though his voice was shaking a little. You are going to stop dinking and you are going to stop now. Do we understand each other? He said forcefully, meaning no was not an option. Naruto nodded his head vigorously. Iruka calmed down and smiled. Well, now that that's settled, Team 7's mission will start in 2 hours. Naruto let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Kakashi looked amused at the sight played before him, and Sasuke and Sakura were still trying to process everything that was happening. Tazuna on the other hand looked disappointed. This meant he wouldn't be able to go to the strip club. Oi, Kakashi-sensei, you wanna come with us? Naruto asked once he regained his breath. Tazuna looked up hopefully, while Iruka whirled around staring at Naruto. Naruto never broke his word. Kakashi looked surprised for a second, but shrugged and nodded. Alright, Team 7 meet at Konoha Gate entrance. Iruka looked on the scene with shock. Naruto? Didn't you just say you weren't going to drink again? Naruto opened the door and let Kakashi and Tazuna out, then turned to face Iruka with an innocent look on his face. Sure I did, but that doesn't mean I got to quit smoking. Naruto stuck his tongue out and bolted out the door. Iruka's expression was one of pure rage. Naruto. Sasuke smirked, while Sakura looked on with disgust written all over her expression. Sandaime didn't know whether to smile or not, so he settled with a sigh. 4 hours later, the sun was shining down brightly over the hidden village of the leaves. The streets were busy and full of life, as cheerful families and friends walked down the dusty roads. Occasionally pausing to chat with friendly commoners as well as saleskeepers. The birds were singing their sweet melody, while the squirrels danced to their music. Where are they? The birds flew out of their nests heading for safe ground. The squirrels ran back deep into the welcoming shadows of the forest and hid in their burrows. The village people stopped their morning rituals and whirled around alarmed, searching for the source of the horrible shrieking sound. Meanwhile at the entrance of Konoha's gates, two short figures stood waiting for their sensei and everybody's favorite blonde and their client. The pink-haired girl fumed, almost pulling her own hair out in frustration. The raven-haired boy next to her, though, watched the girl for his own amusement, not really caring that the three were 2 hours late. After all, he did have an amusing show of his own right now. These were what you call good times. Sakura almost did rip her hair out when the sound of laughter reached their ears, much to Sasuke's disappointment. Kakashi, Tazuna and Naruto came into view, all laughing, smoking, except Kakashi, and making jokes. Sakura's rage seemed to boil up into a great lump waiting to explode at any second. You're late. Inner Sakura had seemed to have taken over, all over Konoha. Screams of agony, shouts of pain, explosions that shook the great forests, yells of the devil itself could be heard all over Konoha. Back at the gate, Kakashi, Naruto and Tazuna lay in a bloody heap on the ground and a certain pink-haired Kunoichi walking away from them. Sasuke hovered over the three with an amused smirk planted on his face. Naruto swore he would have burst out laughing if his Uchiha face would allow it. Remind me never to go anywhere with you again, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto's voice cracked as he spoke. All three fell into unconsciousness. It was hot, the deserted dusty pathway was dry, the grass and foliage of the surrounding forest was parched and some dying. The sun glared down upon the earth's floor, the heat intensifying. Not a fluff of white could be seen in the crystal sky. 5 figures currently occupied the dry road, trudging along in the summer's heat. All, well most, were quiet. Kakashi was reading his porn book, seemingly disregarding his surroundings, but was really taking in everything, sight, sound and smell every time he giggled, which was every 3 minutes. Naruto was walking quietly beside Kakashi, with a bored expression planted on his face. He would occasionally look around and take in his surroundings, or just space out and daydream about ramen. Naruto looked up at the white-hot sun, shadowing his eyes with one hand. Where the sun lay was now a giant bowl of ramen. Naruto stopped walking and stared wide-eyed and mouth-watering. Kakashi, noticing this, rapped Naruto on the head, effectively snapping him out of his trance. Naruto glared at Kakashi before looking back up at the sun, only to find that his giant bowl of ramen was gone. His face fell. Why ramen? Why did you desert me? Why? He thought. Long wavy streams of tears flowed down his face as he kneeled on the ground, shaking his fist angrily at the sun. Kakashi, who was the only one who noticed the sweat dropped. Did he give him brain damage? Sasuke and Sakura, who were up ahead, were walking side by side with Tazuna, were trying to strike conversation while Sakura was, and failing miserably at that. Sasuke and Tazuna listened to the girl go on and on. Tazuna wanted to stuff his head into the ground and block out the sound of her high-pitched voice. Sasuke had gotten 2 oversized earplugs and shoved them in his ear, visibly enjoying the peaceful sound of nothingness, leaving the real Sasuke to suffer the horror of listening to the banshee. The 5 had been walking for 2 days straight. They still needed at least 4 more days to reach the land of waves at the pace they were going. Naruto hated this pace. It was snail pace, an. The pace they are going is normal walking, he hated snail pace, it was worse than turtle pace. Boy, Kid Naruto almost jumped a mile, but stopped himself halfway, luckily no one saw his actions. Damn, he completely forgot about Kyuubi. Finally decided to wake up Habaka Fox. Naruto said jokingly, he could hear Kyuubi mumbling something about the new generation not respecting their elder superiors. Shouldn't you be putting your plan into action by now? The Chunin exams are coming up in almost 3 months, the way things are looking now, it is going to go exactly like last time. Kyuubi paused letting this new information sink in. Then what do you propose I do and since when did I have a plan? Kyuubi almost snorted, what did he ever do to get stuck in such a stupid baka? Sure he killed a few people okay so he killed a lot, but still. He didn't deserve this, right? Kyuubi sighed. How about you train them kid? You have the skills, you have the time we need to work on your patience, though Kyuubi sweat dropped at the sight of Chibi Naruto shouting insults at him, saying he did not have short tolerance. Finishing his little tantrum, Naruto contemplated on the thought of teaching them both, weighing out the pros and cons of the situation. On the plus side he would be able to get them both stronger in a shorter amount of time, with any luck Sakura would be mid-Chunin by the end of these 3 months if she put her back into it and Sasuke could very well make low Jounin level. Hopefully this would make him reconsider his thoughts of taking up Orochimaru's offer, but that would still leave the problem of his brother. Naruto ripped his gaze of Sasuke and found its way over to the pink-haired genin, his eyes narrowed, he needed to knock any if not all thoughts of Sasuke out of her head, his eyes darted over to the breeding Uchiha, he also needed to show him the path away from Orochimaru. In other words he needed to get Sasuke power and knock some sense into that thick skull of his. While thinking on how to do this, Kakashi was watching Naruto with interest from in front, catching the glances he threw at his teammates, he saw his pupils' eyes calculate their every movement, their every word and expression. He saw his eyes narrow and then soften, only to harden and have his face turn into a twisted smile. Naruto laughed evilly to himself, making Kakashi wonder if Naruto really was in his right state of mind. He saw Chibi Naruto cackling madly as dark blackish purple clouds loomed over him, lightning and thunder clashing, creating thunderous sounds. Kakashi blinked and the vision was gone, he felt his forehead was sick. He looked back at Naruto who had his bored expression on again, turning back he wondered if the heat was getting to him. He heard a mad cackle come from behind him, whipping around only to meet the sight of a confused-looking Naruto, staring at his tardy sensei for acting weirdly. Kakashi turned back, maybe he should go see a doctor after the mission. Naruto smirked, that'll teach Kakashi to spy on him while he was spying on others, honestly didn't the man know what the word privacy meant? Kyuubi snorted. Hypocrite mumbled, hey. I'm doing this for a good cause, he's just doing it because he's curious as Kyuubi snorted again. How long did it take for you to think of that comeback? Chibi Naruto smiled sheepishly at the fox while scratching the back of his head. About 20 minutes Kyuubi smacked his forehead with his paw, so he killed people for a living, did he really deserve this punishment? Of every living, breathing person in the world, why did it have to be Naruto he was stuck in? Naruto stared at the backs of his teammates, what could he do to stop fate from catching up to him again, what could he do to stop the inevitable? A little eerie smile came across his features as a light bulb lit up above his head. Maybe it was time to pull a leaf out of Orochimaru's book and lure Sasuke into the promise of redemption for a lack of better words. Kakashi who had decided on that moment to turn around, saw Naruto wearing the creepiest smile he had seen in all his years as a shinobi. He whipped back to the front so fast it was a miracle he did not get whiplash. Turning ever so slightly back to glance at Naruto he found his pupil not behind him. Kakashi stopped short turning his whole body around in search for Naruto. What are you doing? The voice was right next to his ear, making Kakashi jump into full battle mode and almost shove a kunai through Naruto's throat. Everyone froze, then stared and stared and stared. Finally Naruto was the first to move, taking the kunai from his sensei he looked Kakashi straight in the eye and said in a way that made it seem as though he was the parent and Kakashi was a child needing direction. Akachan, sharp objects are bad, you shouldn't play with them, you can hurt yourself or others, don't do it again, okay? Good boy. He pat Kakashi on his head like he was a 4-year-old. Sakura, Sasuke and Tazuna sweat dropped while Kakashi settled for a glare. Naruto, yes Kaka-chan. I hate you. Well, at least you're being honest and telling the truth, we wouldn't want our little sensei to be a liar, now would we? Kakashi groaned, Tazuna snickered, Sasuke smirked, and Sakura fawned over Sasuke ignoring everyone else. 3 hours later night had fallen and the earth was covered in a blanket of darkness. Kakashi signaled them to stop. Tazuna, Sakura and Sasuke moved to make camp as Naruto went over to a tall tree. Jumping up he grabbed a branch and swung himself onto it. Getting comfortable he looked up at the sea of crystals in the night sky. Kakashi-sensei, I'm taking first watch, he called down from the trees. Kakashi looked up from where he was setting up his tent and nodded after regarding Naruto warily. Hours later after everyone had said their goodnights all was quiet except for the summer crickets chirping and the large bats flying in the area quietly hunting for their food. Up in the tree Naruto laid with his hands folded behind his head, his left leg swinging freely down from the tree, while his right leg was bent and foot flat resting on the branch. Sapphire eyes studied his surroundings, even though he knew nothing would disturb them, the clam night's breeze blew past him, ruffling his blonde locks. Naruto sighed getting out of his comfortable position, gathering chakra to his feet on pure instinct he walked down the tree moving to wake Kakashi to take next watch. "How did you do that?" asked a calm smooth voice coming from his right. Naruto turned to the source to find Sasuke, standing calmly fully dressed, "An. Sorry but I just can't imagine Sasuke in PJs, it even sounds wrong." Naruto kept staring for a moment before getting over his shock, how in God's name did he get behind him without him noticing? He turned around now fully facing Sasuke. "Gather a certain amount of chakra to your feet, if you gather too much you'll get repelled, and too little will not allow you to grab hold of the trunk. You need the correct amount to be able to do it, it is part of a chakra control exercise." Naruto said demonstrating all of what he had just said. Sasuke nodded accepting the answer he had just gotten and moved to walk away when Naruto stopped him. "Try it was the only thing he said, before taking a kunai out of his pouch and throwing it to Sasuke who caught it with ease. "Mark the tree every time you're just about to fall. Try getting up to the top of the tree more than 3 times to master it." With it he walked into his tent and mumbling a small goodnight, Sasuke looked at the tree in front of him, studying it for a moment before standing straight. Focusing some chakra to his feet before running towards the tree and climbing up, he got up 10 meters before being blown back and falling to the floor. Inside his tent Naruto smiled, yeah this time would definitely be different. He spent the rest of the night watching Sasuke as he worked, reaching higher and higher before finally reaching the top of the tree after 3 hours. Panting slightly Sasuke smirked triumphantly before setting back to work and climbing the tree once more. Another hour passed before the young male stopped what he was doing panting harshly on the floor trying to regain his breath. After calming himself Sasuke picked himself off the floor and moved back to his tent going inside Naruto saw his shadow collapse onto the sleeping bag. Naruto chuckled before exiting the tent and moved towards Kakashi's tent and kicked it. Kakashi sat up and shot a kunai at Naruto at lightning bolt speed. Dodging the kunai he peeked through the hole the kunai made and asked, "Is this how you treat all your guests Kakashi? Or are you just not a morning person?" Kakashi fumed. "Naruto," he hissed dangerously. Naruto grinned. "Your turn to watch," he said cheerfully with a massive grin on his face before walking away. Inside the tent Kakashi promising bloody murder to the boy before gathering his things and walked outside to stand watch for the rest of the night. Sunlight peeked through the tent creeping slowly towards the sun-kissed figure curled in a blanket, crawling up the blanket and hitting his eyes. Naruto's eyes fluttered open before groaning he rolled over and got up, rubbing his eyes. He exited the tent to find Kakashi already up, either that or he spent the other half of the night keeping watch. "Ahayou gozaimasu," he said yawning. Just then Sasuke came out imitating Naruto's actions and words. Both gathered their things and went down to the nearby river, leaving Kakashi behind blinking at something that should not have happened. Uchihas and Uzumakis do not imitate one another, they do not think the same, they did not do the exact same thing just now, and they did not just say good morning to one another without screaming bloody murder to the world. Kakashi turned to his pupils who were walking calmly down the dusty track that led to the river, both making small talk. "Kakashi, you so need to see a doctor." He looked back at the two figures walking calmly and joking as if it were nothing. He turned back to the campsite and an optometrist. "Is he still looking?" Naruto snickered, his voice barely above a whisper. Sasuke nodded, trying to keep the smile from breaking onto his face. Naruto laughed. "This has got to be the best prank I've ever done on Kakashi." Naruto snickered, trying to keep his laughing under control. "He's going to think he's gone mad by the end of the day." He was holding his stomach in laughter now. Sasuke couldn't contain his and started chuckling with Naruto. Both continued their way to the river, laughing at the possibilities of outcomes their joke could make. Once both had calmed down fully they were at the riverbank and had already freshened up. Naruto peeked at Sasuke out of the corner of his eyes. "Kid, this would be your chance to offer him training." Naruto sunk back into his thoughts. "I could do that. Hey Kyu, what do you think of instead of me personally training him and revealing almost everything about me? How about I find him someone that would almost definitely raise him to mid-Jounin level by the end of let's say 3.5 months. Right now he's most definitely mid to high Chunin level." Kyuubi nodded in understanding. "Only there's one problem with this kid. How are we supposed to find someone willing to do this? You're not Hokage anymore, or yet technically speaking, you barely know anyone that would pull favors like this for you." Naruto smirked. "Did you know, Kyu, that having a Hokage that looks onto you as a grandson figure comes in handy? I mean anything you want he could give you." He replied innocently. Kyuubi laughed a bit. "I've got to hand it to you, kid, you sure know how to pick your connections. Naruto grinned, "But first, I need to teach them the basics, or at least get Kakashi to get off that lazy ass of his." Kyuubi snickered in the background before retreating into the darkness that was Naruto's mind. Naruto looked over to Sasuke who was starting to gather up his possessions. "Sasuke team, did you finish the exercise?" Naruto asked knowing fully that he had. Sasuke turned to face him, a smirk planted onto his features. It could hardly be called an exercise, it was a cinch. Dope, he replied in I am Uchiha and so much better than you I can do anything voice. Naruto muttered something about Uchihas being too stuck up for their own good, before turning and facing him, with a large grin planted on his face, except this grin seemed different, it was hiding something behind it. Sasuke regarded as warily why. He asked contemplating on whether he should leave or stay and see what the dope wanted. Because if it was such an easy exercise, you should be able to do the next exercise in less than 2 days, right? Sasuke narrowed his eyes, the unasked question lingering in the air. Naruto turned his back to Sasuke, now facing the glistening stream of liquid in front of him, again gathering chakra to the soles of his feet. He stepped on top of the liquidated surface, sending a pool of ripples through his surroundings. Turning back, he almost laughed at the Uchiha's expression but held it back, clearing his throat. Sasuke met Naruto's gaze. Can you do it? He asked, a challenge hidden inside the words that had left his mouth. Sasuke's eye narrowed. He's never going to get the hang of water walking in under 2 days, not without the proper advice. If you want to allow things to speed up, give him the proper direction and be sure not to give away exactly what you have to do like the last time, otherwise I assure you he will never learn. Naruto mentally nodded. I'll give you a head start, even though it is similar to it, the water walking exercise is a lot harder than the tree walking. To be able to master it you will have to find out the answer yourself, I can't give it to you this time. Just remember to use the correct amount of chakra and remember that you are walking on liquid, not a solid. Sasuke was giving Naruto his utmost attention yet trying not to show it. But, you can't practice now, Naruto said, sheepishly rubbing the back of his head and grinning his Uzumaki grin. Sasuke's eye twitched, just remembering that they were on a mission and not back in Konoha, but not at all the same, storing the information he had just heard in the back of his mind. Naruto smirked as he watched his comrade walk away, one down, one to go. Gathering his possessions, he ran up behind Sasuke after calling his name. The male turned to face the blonde, giving him a questioning look. Naruto stopped in front of him with a wide grin on his face. Want to scare the shit out of Kakashi sensei? He asked all too innocently. Sasuke smirked somewhat evilly. 4 simple words left Sasuke's mouth, words that would bring pure chaos upon their poor unsuspecting teacher. What's the plan, dope? Back at camp, Kakashi sneezed a total of 7 times. Tazuna and Sakura looked over at the Cyclops. Now Kaka-sensei, maybe you should go get that checked after we complete the mission, Sakura said, sounding a bit concerned for the welfare of her teacher, or Kakashi supposed. Tazuna on the other hand went on about paying good money for good shinobi, but instead gets 3 shrimps and a sick scarecrow. Both Sakura and Kakashi sweat dropped at the comments the bridge builder threw at them. It was dark, the night was cold compared to the heat that rose in the day, as a soft breeze blew past a deserted street surrounded by trees, as 2 shadowed figures blurred past, faster than the normal eye could follow. A pink-haired female teen whipped around, kunai ready in hand, a silver-haired man's eye narrowed, he studied his surroundings, not sure what to make of it, a bead of sweat trickled down his face, the girl's eyes were wide as she stood frozen in fear, sweat also running down her small face. A small tink could be heard from behind Kakashi, his visible eye widened, turning back to his female student, he mentally cursed himself at the sight he met. Sakura's emerald eyes were open wide in fear and shock, as a very sharp kunai came to contact with her throat, resting only to be centimeters from slitting it. The holder of the kunai smirked, his ebony black eyes danced in amusement, onyx hair fluttered in the wind, along with his blue high-collared baggy shirt. Uchiha Sasuke gave a low chuckle full of malice. Kakashi gritted his teeth, it was a near hopeless situation. Inside, Sakura's mind was going haywire. What could she do? She couldn't hurt Sasuke, but she could never in a million years hope to achieve what the male behind her was asking. She gritted her teeth and closing her bright green eyes, she clutched her kunai tighter, raising it, faster, then lightning she struck, blood splattered onto the grass below and on the black figure. Kakashi and Sasuke looked on in shock. The kunai that was in Sasuke's now bloodied hand lay on the ground. Kakashi wasted no more time and struck immediately. Sasuke saw the attack too late. Kakashi smiled from under the mask as he went in for the killing blow. Sasuke bent his head forward, closing his eyes, a smirk planted onto his face. Kakashi's expression turned into one of pure horror as he found himself pinned onto the ground with shuriken. A heavy weight was put upon him as a razor-sharp kunai found its way to his now exposed neck. He soon found himself staring at Sakura, who was in the same situation. Both student and teacher cursed themselves mentally as Naruto, who sat on top on Kakashi, and Sasuke, who sat on top of Sakura, both smirked. Naruto pressed the kunai tighter to Kakashi's throat as Sasuke did the same. This is why you need to do this, Kakashi, Naruto hissed dangerously. Sakura struggled from under Sasuke. Sasuke-kun, why are you doing this? She shouted, desperate for an answer, almost in tears at the certain situation. Why are you going along with this? Why are you listening to that blonde-haired idiot? Naruto shot a cold glare her way, she visibly flinched back at the cold crystal eyes. Sasuke's gaze on her back intensified at the words spoken, he dug the kunai deeper against her throat, almost drawing blood. That blonde-haired idiot just happened to come up with a plan that succeeded to take down a Junin genin in under 10 minutes, that's more than I could say for you. Sakura bit her bottom lip trying to keep from the tears escaping her eyes. So Kakashi-sensei, Sakura-san, I guess this means you'll have to do it. Naruto smirked evilly. Kakashi gritted his teeth, this wasn't good, his mind went into a rush trying to get out of the current situation. Don't bother Kakashi-sensei, there is no way out, hand it over. Never. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Hand it over Kakashi-sensei and no one need be hurt, don't be so foolish as to tempt me, he said as he pressed the kunai further into the man's skin, effectively breaking it and drawing blood. Kakashi gritted his teeth at the pain that came with the blood. Naruto smiled maniacally, now are you going to hand it over or not? He said forcefully. Kakashi gritted his teeth, only this time not from the pain. Sakura shook in fear and frustration. How did it turn out this way? Why did it turn out this way? Everything was going fine, why did it have to be like this? It doesn't have to end like this, Kakashi-sensei, all you have to do is give us what we want, Sasuke said quietly. A heavy silence found its way upon them, sweat ran down each of their faces, Kakashi cursed over and again, Sakura mumbled something about it being impossible after all hope was now lost for them. Kakashi was about to hand it over to Naruto and Sasuke when why you know, if you asked, I could have just paid for dinner myself. A sweat-dropping Tazuna said, slightly disturbed at the sight of the scene. The four shinobi took a look at their surroundings, only now noticing the large crowd that had gathered around them. All separated as far away from each other as fast as possible, Tazuna went over to a scared stiff waiter and handed him the correct amount of money needed, all the while mumbling something about crazy ninjas and troublesome blonde-haired kids that had more mood swings than a pumsing woman. As they exited the area and made their way across the small town they had made a side trip to, Kakashi made a mental note never to agitate his male students and to always pay for dinner, it would save him his pride and his life. Sakura was once again trying to flirt with Sasuke, who was completely ignoring her, and talked to Tazuna, who in turn tried to walk faster to get away from the girl. Behind them all was Naruto, walking once again at snail pace. Sasuke, who was still trying to block out Sakura's annoying voice, turned back to look at Naruto, suddenly remembering his challenge. Looking back up ahead he walked faster to catch up with Kakashi. Kakashi-sensei, how long are we staying here? A silence washed over the both of them. Sasuke did not know what to make of the silence, but held his own and waited for his sensei to respond. Kakashi looked down from his book, only seemingly noticing now that his student was next to him at all. You say something. Sasuke had to hold himself from falling flat of his face. I asked how long we would be staying here, he said, annoyed, trying to keep his right eye from twitching and failing miserably. For the rest of the night, Kakashi replied, a bit curious as to why Sasuke would ask this, but let it slide and kept walking, taking in his surroundings. Sasuke took in the information and kept a scowl from reaching the surfacing and gracing his features. How was he supposed to do the exercise and prove the dope wrong now? From the back, Naruto had heard the whole conversation and knew what Sasuke was thinking. Picking up his pace, he walked over to Tazuna, cutting Sakura off mid-sentence. Tazuna-san, do you have a lake near your house? He asked loud enough so that Sasuke could hear. Naruto saw Sasuke's ears prick up at his voice, trying to ever so casually listen into the conversation. Tazuna turned to the child and nodded. Yes, why? He asked, letting his curiosity get the better of him. Naruto simply grinned and said, because I want to get out of this heat, it's killing me. Tazuna snorted, mumbling something about worthless ninjas that couldn't even take the heat. Meanwhile, Naruto was getting severely scolded by Sakura for cutting her off. Naruto blocked her out and went back to playing chess with Kyuubi. The score was 10-1 to Kyuubi. The great fox would torment and tease the boy every time he won a game, but was impressed that the blonde had actually won a game against him. Sasuke looked back at Naruto and stared. Was it coincidence? No, nothing was ever a coincidence with Naruto. He had heard the conversation he had with Kakashi, but how? Naruto had been well out of hearing range when he had spoken with their sensei. Sasuke willed the thoughts away. He would wait, after all Naruto had proven himself that he wasn't as weak as everyone thought. Let's see what you can do, Uzumaki. Naruto was his only thoughts as he continued to trudge along the dusty road towards a tall building. Leaving the unsuspecting blonde to argue with Kyuubi, who had just won another game that made the score 11-1, Kyuubi. Once the group acquired their rooms, Sakura got her own room. She did not want to be in the same room as an perverted old man, a drunken smelly old man, and a hyperactive klutz, although she did invite Sasuke to share a room with her. In turn, he called her pathetic and pushed past her. Sasuke and Naruto were sharing another room, while Kakashi shared with Tazuna. When Sakura voiced her opinion about not wanting to share a room with them, Kakashi had tears running down from his visible eye, mumbling something about Sakura being mean. Tazuna replied with his own insult which Naruto did not hear, but it earned Tazuna a rather hard punch to the head, creating a large lump. Naruto sweat dropped at the sight of the group and their antics. Why was he cursed? Trust me kid, you're far from cursed, although I do wonder at times with your lack of brain power. Chibi. Naruto pointed and yelled at Kyuubi, jumping up and down, shouting that he was not dumb and did not lack brain power. A large sweat drop appeared on the back of Kyuubi's head. Yep, Naruto was definitely doomed to stupidity for all eternity. I heard that baka fox. Chibi. Naruto shouted, still pointing at him. Kyuubi got another smaller sweat drop on top of the larger one. Naruto. Baka. Naruto, listen to me when I'm talking to you. Sakura went to hit Naruto, but Naruto dodged the punch and looked at Sakura, who was now on the ground having tripped over her own feet. The blonde looked down at the pink-haired female. A couple of seconds passed, and 3 dots appeared above Naruto and Sakura's heads. Sakura, why are you on the floor? Sakura had a large anime vein pop out on her head and her clenched fist, which she held in front of her face as she arose from the ground. Naruto, her voice was filled with malice and anger. Although Naruto took no notice of it and continued to look on at her with an confused expression on his face. If you were that tired you should have said so, we could have gotten here earlier, he said absent-mindedly as he brushed past her into the boys' room. Leaving Sakura engulfed with flames and shaking in rage. Kakashi and Tazuna, who saw the sight, gave a little chuckle. Sakura whipped around at the sound and gave them a death glare. It was pretty intimidating. Both of their faces paled to a pasty white. They dashed to their room and locked the door, before adding another 10 locks and locking them, as well as getting planks from God knows where and nailing them to the door 20 times each, before going to hide under their blankets. Sakura, who had heard this from the other side, screamed in rage before turning around and stomping off into her own room. Is she gone? Asked Tazuna from underneath the blanket. Yeah, Kakashi replied, before both snorted in laughter. Meanwhile, inside their room, Naruto was off to have a shower, taking the cloak that the Saindom had given him and laying it out on a chair, completely disregarding the fact that Sasuke was watching his every movement. However, his eyes seemed to linger on the cloak that Naruto had taken off, before the onyx eyes once again found themselves watching the blonde-haired person as he disappeared into the bathroom. Sasuke heard the click of the bathroom door and the sound of water running. Looking over at the coat again, he stared at it for a few seconds before jumping up and running towards it. Being careful not to move it out of place, he searched through the pockets, searching for anything that could give him a better understanding of the ninja on the other side of the door. Instead, all he found was a lot of scrolls, explosive tags, spare kunai and shuriken, as well as multiple numbers, other sharp objects that he didn't even know the name to. How the hell does he hide this stuff? Was all that ran through his head as he studied the weapons. Opening one of the scrolls, he was about to read through it when the running water suddenly stopped. Closing the scroll once more, he gathered everything and put them in the correct places as best he could and laid the cloak down in the exact position Naruto had laid it down. The click from the door told Sasuke that Naruto was exiting, moving faster than light itself. He dove under the bed sheets, laying perfectly still as Naruto came out of the bathroom. A lot of rustling and shuffling could be heard before a click sounded throughout the room when Naruto had turned off the light. Sasuke breathed, knowing he hadn't gotten caught. On the other side of the room, lying on his bed, if one looked close enough they would be able to see Naruto smirking in the dark. Yeah, he had Sasuke hooked. Now all he had to do was find the right trainer, but before that, boy team, you still awake? HN, what is it dope? Want to see Kakashi sensei scared shitless? Shuffling could be heard from Sasuke's bed before a soft padding, a click of the light switch. From his bed, Naruto grinned evilly, while Sasuke, who was still standing next to the switch, grinned back. Kakashi awoke from his slumber, frowning a little as to why that was. He lay immobile on his bed, eyes still closed, listening to his surroundings. Shuffling could be heard from his surroundings. Kakashi was on full alert inside his room. No, it was coming from outside. An enemy? He heard panting. Wait, what? Ah. Huff huff and not so hard pant. Some shuffling could be heard. Kakashi blushed but gave a perverted giggle. It's kind of hard pant to do this while you're squirming pant. Kakashi giggled again. So both, by the sound of it, were males and pretty young too. Kakashi gave a quiet perverted giggle again, his blush intensifying. If his memory served him right, the only males sharing one room on this floor was himself and Tazuna, and Kakashi's eyes snapped open as he shot up from his pillow. Sasuke and Naruto. Ah. Pant, watch. Ah. W, where you prod th that thing T-team. Kakashi paled. I pant would I if you would stop squirming. Huff huff and not my fault. Ah. Why you suck at this. Ah. Shuffling could be heard. Then do it pant yourself if you can pant. Kakashi paled further. Ah. Pant mmff huff huff. Kakashi blushed so hard it would have put Hinata to shame. Huff huff Sasuke pant help me gasp. That was it for Kakashi. After having a massive nosebleed, he flashed out of his bed and out the door in front of Sasuke's and Naruto's, not surprised to see a red in the face Sakura already there. Both barged into the room. What the hell are you doing? A dirty Sasuke and Naruto, both covered in mud, cuts and droplets of blood, looked up from what they were doing. Naruto's arm was in Sasuke's hand. Sasuke had a bloody cotton ball in his other hand, dabbing the blood off of Naruto's arm. "Ah. I told you, huff huff, watch where you prod that thing." Sasuke glared at the blonde. "Would you hold still, pants?" Sakura and Kakashi looked on, before both fainted from shock and relief. "An. You dirty-minded people. XP, sorry Aoi fans, maybe next time." Both Sasuke and Naruto waited a couple of seconds before bursting out in laughter. That W was hilarious, gasp ha. Ha. Naruto choked out between gasps of laughter and a bit of pain, his arms still hurt from training. Sasuke could only nod his head before calming down and turning back towards Naruto, saying, "So, when's the next prank?" A sly smirk made its way across his features. Naruto turned to look at the raven-haired boy and gave an equally sly smirk. Very, very soon. The four ninjas and their charge were once again walking down a dusty road towards their destination. All was quiet. Kakashi wasn't even reading his book anymore due to it bringing up, certain memories. Sakura was sending questioning glances towards the two boys, while Tazuna was oblivious to everything. Inside his mind, Naruto had once again challenged Kyuubi to another game of chess and was losing, though not as bad this time. The score was currently 3-12. Kyuubi was silently applauding the boy's increase in intellect, all the while still trying to crush him mercilessly at the game. Sasuke was currently doing the cha-cha maracas and all, celebrating the fact that Sakura was not leeching off of him today, another plus that came with the prank him and Naruto had played on them. Meanwhile, back with Naruto, he suddenly snapped out of his match with Kyuubi as soon as he saw the puddle. Looking back at Kakashi, their eyes met, each knowing what the other was thinking. Looking back ahead, Naruto flicked Sasuke's shoulder. Sakura silently fumed. Sasuke, on the other hand, seemed to have noticed the puddle as well and gave Naruto a sign that he understood. Slowing down, he stepped in time to Sakura. Sakura gave him a questioning look, having noticed the silent message passed between her two teammates. Sasuke, as discreetly as he could, looked over at the puddle. Sakura silently following his gaze, she stopped herself from widening her eyes and looked back to the road in front of them, all four shinobi ready for the oncoming attack. In an instant, what was a normal, well, what could be considered normal in these circumstances, day had been turned into a complete disaster as Naruto found himself slowly bleeding to death from his new stab wound, and if the stab wound didn't kill him, the poison injected into him would. Flashback no jutsu. Two ninjas melted out from the puddle and dashed to each side of Kakashi, bringing out a thick shuriken chain, wrapping it around the surprised Jounin. The two pulled the chains, effectively ripping Kakashi to pieces. One down. Sakura held back a scream and froze in shock before being brought out of it by Sasuke's sudden movements. Sprinting in front of a terrified Tazuna, she pulled out a kunai, holding it in front of her the way the academy had taught her, watching the two rogue shinobi and calculating their movements, slowly formulating a plan to use their weaknesses to her advantage if needed. Both rogue shinobi sprang past the heap that was once Kakashi and made their way at unimaginable speed towards Naruto. Appearing behind him, Sasuke immediately sprang into action, hesitating only when Naruto did a backflip to avoid the oncoming attack. Having distracted them with a backflip, Naruto sent a sign to Sasuke to get a move on before they notice him. Appearing above both ninjas next to Naruto, he sent a shuriken hurling at the shuriken chain, pinning it to a tree, doing the same to the other end of the weapon next, and embedding two kunai through the center of the stars to hold both weapons in place, while also disabling their opponent's arms. Naruto landed behind the two, while Sasuke landed on top of their clawed arms. Well, their hands are clawed, but work with me here. Using his arms to hoist himself up, he landed a chakra-empowered kick to their faces, sending both sprawling backwards, also effectively ripping the shuriken chain out of their sockets and hanging limp from the trees. This gave the demon's brothers freedom. Both dashed past Naruto straight to Tazuna and Sakura, who pushed her client out of harm's way, sweat slowly dripping from her face onto the dusty floor, ready to put the already formulated plan to action. Naruto suddenly appeared in front of the pink-haired female and the drunken client. The attack came too soon as the blonde found himself holding back two clawed hands with nothing but a kunai. Slowly being pushed back, he motioned for Sakura to usher Tazuna away from the blonde and the two missed shinobi. Losing concentration on what he was doing, Naruto slipped back, giving the two shinobi a clear shot for a killing blow. Just then Sasuke appeared behind them, knocking one out. He was too late to reach the other. Naruto took the attack head on. Blood splattered everywhere. Naruto held the clawed hand from going any deeper into his shoulder than it already had. The missed shinobi was suddenly ripped out of his grasp when Kakashi came, holding the demon brother under his arm and knocking him out. Then flashback no jutsu. You're late, Naruto growled out to his sensei, who laughed nervously. Panting for breath, he slid down a tree holding his stab wound, everyone watching him. You better tie them up before they regain consciousness. Kakashi hesitated before nodding to his student. Turning to Sasuke, he motioned for him to follow. Hesitating, he took one last look at the blonde, who gave him one of his goofy smiles before following his sensei. Naruto turned to the pink-haired female who was staring in horror, Sakura. She snapped out of her daze and ran up to him, kneeling down next to the blonde. "In my cloak in the bottom left-hand pocket there is a scroll." Sakura fumbled with his cloak trying to reach the scroll. "Kyuubi, how's it looking? Your heart's going to stop within 4 minutes if you don't find the antidote," the beast replied calmly. "Oh, joy, don't heal me completely, just slow it down." Kyuubi was curious as to what the boy was up to, but followed his orders all the same. Finally reaching the scroll, Naruto told her to smear his blood on it. She hesitated. "Listen Sakura, my heart's going to stop in little under 4 minutes now. I don't care if you're worried about getting your hands dirty or breaking a nail, just do it." Sakura yelped under his command and smeared the blood on it. "Do you know what it is yet?" "Ventricular tachycardia. Digitalis." Naruto fumbled with his memory, trying to find the antidote. A small poof sounded throughout the clearing, and medical supplies appeared in front of both him and Sakura. "Sakura, I need you to take the defibrillator from the pouch," he panted. It was getting harder to breathe. Sakura fumbled hurriedly as she pulled the device apart. "Clam down," Naruto muttered. Sakura threw him a glare. Naruto chuckled. "Now attach the leads to my chest." Sakura wasted no time and ripped his shirt apart. "No, not that way, you dirty-minded people, shame on you all." And attached them securely onto his chest. While all this was happening, Kakashi and Sasuke watched on curiously. "Why is it Kyuubi isn't healing you, Naruto?" "Because he can't." "No, more like you're not letting him." "Why?" Kakashi glanced at Sakura. "Is this why you're not letting Kyuubi heal you, to teach Sakura?" Kakashi watched on confused. "Sakura, wait for it to load. When it does, push the red button. You only have one chance before you can get my heart beating again." Naruto panted as breathing labored. Sakura nodded her head nervously, watching the device intently, wishing for it to hurry up. The last little screen lit up. She moved hurriedly to push the button. Naruto's eyes widened. "It's lit a crane." "Sakura, don't push the red button yet." Sakura's hands froze over the button. She looked up at Naruto, eyes widened in fear. "Take the blue combapan, Sakura, mid-neck into my vein." Sakura nodded. Moving quickly, she took it and injected the liquid into his vein. Naruto winced. She could have been a bit more gentle, he grumbled inwardly, forgetting the fact that was about to die in little less than a minute. Naruto's vision went blurry. His breathing stopped altogether. Naruto fell back a bit more, slipping, drenched in sweat. "Naruto." Sakura's eyes widened in alarm seeing his struggle. Kakashi rushed over to his student. Naruto's lips moved, but Sakura couldn't hear him, screaming at him to speak louder. Naruto used his last ounce of strength to mumble out the words. "Press the fucking goddamn button," before he fell back unconscious. Sakura didn't need telling twice. She pushed down on the red button. Naruto's body jerked before he shot up, gasping for breath. Looking around wildly, his vision stopped at Sakura, who by now had tears gently pouring down her cheeks. "You okay?" he asked. Sakura looked at him as if he had grown another head. "Me?" Naruto laughed, wiping some of the sweat off of his face. Tazuna and Sasuke looked at Naruto wearily, as if he were to fall dead any second. Kakashi just sighed, not even bothering to try to find out what was going on in the mind of his student, for now. Soon all five were walking down the dusty road again, that is after Tazuna had been interrogated. Kakashi picked up his pace, discreetly stepping side by side with Naruto. "Why didn't Kyuubi heal you?" he asked in a low voice, keeping his head in his little orange book. "I told him not to," was all Naruto said before picking up his pace and struck a conversation with Tazuna. Kakashi looked on at the small boy, frowning. "What are you up to, Naruto? Did you intentionally get hurt when you could have easily dodged that attack?" "But why?" Kakashi thought over Naruto's words and looked over at Sakura. "Was it so you could test her in those types of situations? Or was it to show her that being ninja isn't as glamorous as she thought it would be? Are you trying to get her to realize what being ninja is about?" He sighed. "Why did I pass this team again?" Kakashi wondered as he went back to reading his book. They continued down the track, stopping only to eat and sleep. A day had passed since the incident, and Sakura was more alert than ever now, keeping talking to a minimum low, which Tazuna and Sasuke were thankful for. Everyone kept their eye on Naruto, all wondering whether he was really okay, well, except for Kakashi, who was listening to Naruto chat animatedly to him. Kakashi kept his one-eyed smile on his face as his cute student talked and waved his arms in the air making imitations, only to pitch into the conversation every now and then, making Naruto grin widely at the jokes he made. Yet the atmosphere suddenly changed when Naruto stopped abruptly facing the bushes. His eyes narrowed before widening and then going back to normal. Kakashi, who had seen the whole thing, walked up to Naruto, putting his hand on the blonde's shoulder, giving him a questioning look. Naruto looked up at his sensei and grinned. "Ah, just a little chest pain, must have been an aftermath of the poison. I'll be fine," he said. Kakashi nodded, not believing his student's lie for 1 second. But continued walking. Naruto close at his heels, looking back at the bushes. He came into contact with blood-red eyes with a spiked wheel in the center. Naruto gave the eyes a knowing look before turning back to Kakashi and continuing the conversation. The eyes followed the blonde figure until he was out of sight, all the while wondering how had the blonde known. At night after making camp, Naruto separated himself from the rest of the group, saying he was going down to the river to take a bath. Making his way through the thick foliage, a small river came into view. Walking down to the river, he felt a presence behind him, yet made no sign that he had noticed the dark figure. Going to bend down to feel the temperature of the water, he felt something cold and sharp come into contact with his skin. Naruto smiled a little. Good afternoon, Itachi-kun. Naruto-kun. The wind picked up, making the surrounding foliage sway and shudder in its grasp. No signs of life interfered with the two. The two stood still before Itachi dug the kunai further into Naruto's neck, making the blonde smile widen. Nah, Itachi-kun, how about you stop the act? Naruto murmured under his breath, knowing Itachi would hear it loud and clear. The other male looked down curiously at the blonde. And why, Naruto-kun, would you believe I am acting? The male asked, the volume of his voice matching Naruto's. I know more than you could imagine, Itachi-kun, I know you're innocent, was the only response Naruto gave before disappearing from sight, leaving an intrigued Itachi behind. Lowering the kunai in his hand, Itachi gave a small smirk before disappearing into the night himself. Naruto watched him go from behind a tree, a smile formed onto his features. He is interested. Good. Hit, what are you up to? Are you trying to get Sasuke to stay or leave? Naruto gave a small smile. Don't worry, Kyuubi, I know exactly what I'm doing. That's what worries me, the demon grumbled. Naruto frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Kyuubi. Gasp, it can't be you don't trust me. Why, Kyuubi? I thought we were friends. Chibi. Naruto sat in front of Kyuubi's cage, hugging his knees with tears streaming down his face, and he wonders why I don't trust him. Damn, Gaki. The beast retreated back into the blonde's mind, leaving Naruto to weep alone. After a while he got up and took his bath. Upon returning to the campsite he came face to face with Sasuke. Both gave each other blank looks and stood like that for 3 minutes before Naruto opened his mouth speak, but Sasuke beat him to it. Want to prank Kakashi sensei again? The blonde smiled widely. You read my mind, Uchiha, giving him a smirk. The raven replied with a, well, they say great minds do think alike. Naruto's eyes widened before he dashed to the nearest tree and hid behind it. Peering out from the side he glared at Sasuke with squinting eyes. Who are you and what have you done with Sasuke? He would never say something as nice as that to anyone. Sasuke's sweat dropped before walking up to Naruto, who took a defensive guard and bobbed him on the head. Naruto fell face first into the floor from the force of the hit. Getting up he rubbed his head, pouting at Sasuke. He stuck his tongue out. Meanwhile, can't you take a joke? Sasuke got an I'm vain pop on his head as he tried to keep his normal facade on. Are we going to do this prank or not? He growled out. Naruto looked up from the ground with big round shining eye. Hell yeah. Earning him a small smirk from his companion. Naruto awoke to the sound of screaming. He shot up out of his tent, kunai ready in his hand, looking around wildly. He spotted Kakashi and Sasuke in the same defensive position he was in, while behind them was a terrified-looking Tazuna. All tensed as a rustle came from the nearby foliage. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he raised his kunai ready to strike when needed, that is until he saw Sakura's tear-stained face, looking around wildly for any rogue shinobi that might have held her captive. He stood there confused until he realized why she had been crying. Taking another look at her he fell to the floor bursting with laughter. Tazuna's boisterous laugh soon joined his. Kakashi gave a little chuckle while Sasuke gave an amused smirk. Sakura glared at them all. Standing in front of them was a fuming white-haired Sakura. Her hair seemed to be dyed poorly with paint and was sticking up in all places. The paint seemed to have dried and crusted overnight, making it look as if she had a terrible dandruff problem. Sakura turned and fixated her glare on Naruto, who looked up at her, meeting her gaze, tears in his eyes from laughing so hard. You know, I don't think people were trying to be literal when they said Christmas in July. Sakura, he chalked out between all the laughter. Naruto. She growled out, sadness forgotten. She strode forward towards the laughing blonde who took no notice of her. You did this, didn't you? She stated menacingly. Naruto's laughter stopped almost immediately. He gave her angry frown. Sakura, I know you're mad, but you shouldn't go wrongly accusing people like that. The pyre white-haired female's glare turned into an icy storm as her anger reached whole new levels. Her whole body shook as she tried to control her anger and refrain herself from killing the young shinobi in front of her, but unfortunately was doing a poor job at it. Thankfully Kakashi happened to intervene at this moment to stop the situation from developing into something uncontrollable. Ma, Sakura, calm down, I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for how and why this happened, Kakashi said nervously, his visible eye in an upturned U-shape, while his hands were in front of him, stopping the pyre white-haired girl from stepping any further towards Naruto. Sakura gave her sensei a disbelieving look, clenching her fist. She rose one arm so that her fist was next to her face, narrowing her eyes, eyebrows twitching, she shook in anger. Aka-sensei, how can there be a logical explanation for something like this? She shouted, pointing at her head, more specifically her hair. That was it for Tazuna, who burst out laughing, clutching his stomach. Naruto soon joined him, dropping back on the floor in fits of laughter. Sasuke, who was watching from the sidelines with Tazuna, gave a little chuckle. Kakashi gave Sakura a sympathetic one-eyed smile, his hand still in front of him, stopping a fuming Sakura from murdering anybody, namely Naruto. Having calmed everyone down, Sakura continued to accuse Naruto for ruining her hair. Naruto in turn argued that he was innocent of the crime committed. Kakashi finally made Sakura agree to wait till they get to Tazuna's house to fix it, brushing her now unruly hair. While trying to, she just gave up and tied it into a high messy bun, letting a few strands fall onto her features before begrudgingly agreeing to her sensei's proposition, and all were again on the road and on their way to Tazuna's house. Looking back, Naruto slowed his pace, evening it with Sasuke's, "You couldn't wait until we pranked Kakashi." Naruto mumbled under his breath, folding his arms behind his head. Sasuke smirked, shrugging. He said, "You were taking your time, I had to do something to pass the time, besides she was getting on my nerves," he murmured back to his blonde comrade. Looking back at Sasuke, he smirked. "You're really catching on to this prank thing." Almost like a natural, Sasuke smirked. "I'm a natural at everything, dope. I'm still surprised at how slow you can be." Naruto let out a little growl, turning away from the raven. He let out a little HMPH. "Well, not like I didn't see that one coming, damn that arrogant bastard." Soon all 5 of them found themselves on a boat, crossing over to the land of the waves. A mist seemed to have settled in the surrounding area. Naruto peered over the edge of the boat at an unfinished bridge, but although unfinished it was still impressive. The blonde smiled at the bridge, all the while thinking how much good the old man was doing for his country. Tazuna caught the smile and smiled himself. He tilted his hat to hide it. Suddenly the boat started to rock as Naruto jumped up and down in excitement, pointing at the bridge. Old man, that's your bridge, right?" "Right." Tazuna didn't have time to answer as he grabbed onto the boat, hoping not to fall over the edge from all the rocking, everyone else following his lead. "Oh oi. Dope. Stop jumping, you're rocking the boat, baka." Naruto stopped and turned to Sasuke, a smirk on his face. "Why scared at ya?" he taunted. Sasuke glared at him. "I'm not scared of anything, dope." "Oh really?" His smirk got wider, suddenly planting a horrified look on his face. He pointed behind the raven and shouted, "The fangirls are coming." Sasuke's eyes widened as both he and Kakashi hid behind Naruto, screaming. Naruto looked oddly at Kakashi, as did everyone else. The silver-haired Jounin rubbed the back of his head. "Ma, we all got our problems." Sakura giggled. Naruto, Tazuna and Sasuke sweat dropped. "What kind of taste do girls have these days?" the blonde thought as he looked down at a smiling Kakashi. Shaking his head he sighed. "We'll be there soon," the owner of the boat said suddenly. Naruto sat back down, resting his back on the side of the boat, his arms resting on the edge, as Tazuna and the boat's owner discussed the best possible way to cross without being detected. The blonde looked back down into the deep abyss that was the sea. His heart skipped a beat as he saw a large shadow move under the surface of the water. Turning around, he leaned back over the edge, trying to make out what the object might be. Probably just a fish, he reasoned with himself. He clearly remembered the fight with Zabuza to be on land, although Kakashi did get trapped in a sphere made of water. He reached in his pouch, digging out a kunai. "What are you doing, dope?" Sasuke mumbled. Naruto turned to look at his teammate, his finger on his lip. Kakashi looked at them from over his book, suddenly tense. Sneaking his own hand into his pouch, he pulled out his own kunai, hiding it discreetly. Taking it upon himself to look over his side of the boat, he found himself shooting back as a large, and I'm talking 7 meters long, fish, jaws wide open, hundreds of razor teeth protruding out of red gums, deep black beady eyes, soaked in water, leaped out of the water, diving over them and the boat. Everyone stopped and stared awed until Naruto said, "It's a shark." That's when it hit them. They were alone in the middle of the mist, on a boat surrounded by water with no way of getting help. The shark rocked the boat as it entered the water's surface again, creating a large wave to wash over them, and soaking wet. Naruto looked over his side of the boat excitedly. "Nana, Kakashi-sensei, can we keep him?" Everyone turned to Naruto to see if he was joking. Looking over, they were sorely disappointed to see that his eyes were shining like a kid whose Christmas came early. He was giddy with excitement as the shark surfaced again, its black beady eyes studying them, before going under again. "Sugoi. So cool, please Kakashi-sensei, I promise I'll take care of it and feed it." He glanced sideways at Sakura, who shrunk away, eyes wide with terror. "Now do you think I can teach it how to roll over?" Naruto shook with glee, a happy grin on his face. Suddenly he stopped and put his finger to his jaw. In a thinking manner he said to himself, "I wonder how long it takes for a shark to maul a human." He glanced sideways again, catching Sasuke's eye along the way. Amusement danced in the raven's eyes. "Great way to pass the time, isn't it, dope? Should we test it out?" he suddenly found himself saying as he also glanced at Sakura. He didn't know whether to be mad with rage or wetting her pants. Terrified, she decided for the first option. She shook with anger and shouted with all her might, "No." Both boys looked at her, then turned away saying, "Party pooper." Kakashi sweat dropped along with Tazuna. The boat's owner looked at them like they were all nutcases. Well, they are. Kakashi saw the shark coming at full speed. Naruto also noticed only his face was shining with delight. In a matter of seconds he said as fast as he could, "No, Naruto, you can't have it. No matter how much you try it won't work. You can't transport a shark. And no, you can't test feed Sakura to it. And finally, are you freaking crazy?" Taking a much needed breath he tossed Naruto out of the way, just as the shark surfaced once again, diving towards them at unimaginable speed, but fortunately Kakashi was faster and whipped out his katana, slicing the beast in half. Naruto gasped. "No, kiss him." Sasuke turned around. "You named it." Naruto nodded, depressed, and after a strong warrior too. Sasuke gave Naruto a confused look. War. Naruto nodded again, pulling a book out from his pocket, flipping the pages he stopped and showed Sasuke, who read out the name "Kiss him Hoshigaki." Kakashi whipped around after putting away his katana. "Where did you get that?" he said, pointing at the book. Both males looked up from the book. This. I got it out of your back pocket. It's a good read at night when I'm bored." Kakashi sweat dropped. Suddenly the boat's owner butted in. "We're here finally, thank God," he added to himself. Naruto looked around. "I didn't know we were moving." Sakura gave him a "you're an idiot" look before getting off the boat. "Well, he does look like him," Sasuke said, looking back towards the shark. "I think they're cousins," Naruto said, also looking curiously at the photo. "And the shark?" Sasuke just nodded in agreement. Creeping up behind them, Sakura let out a gasp of surprise. "They do look the same." Both males turned towards her and nodded. Kakashi just sweat dropped again, hauling the creature's head off the boat. After all were off, Tazuna and the boat's owner exchanged a few words before all were on their way again. Coming closer to a clearing and looking around, Naruto found the place familiar as his eyes landed on the lake up ahead. His senses suddenly became sharper. On pure instinct, he whipped a kunai out of pouch, embedding it deep into a trunk of a tree. Suddenly, on full alert, Kakashi put away his book, searching the bushes where the kunai was thrown. He came out holding a scared to death white rabbit. Looking at it curiously, Sakura rounded onto Naruto, shouting at him for playing around and almost injuring an innocent rabbit. Ignoring her, Naruto studied his surroundings. Suddenly realization hit both Naruto and Kakashi. The young shinobi's ears pricked as he heard a large object whir through the air heading straight for them. Tackling Tazuna to the ground, he yelled, "Get down!" Sasuke, who was now closest to Sakura, tackled her down to the floor while Kakashi dodged the oncoming sword. Picking themselves up, they looked up just in time to see the sword curve up and embed itself into a nearby tree. Suddenly a large figure landed on the hilt of the sword, gazing down at them. His gaze landed on Kakashi, who tensed ready for battle. Smirking a little, his eyes bored into Kakashi's visible one. No wonder the demon brothers were defeated. Sharingan Kakashi, sorry, but the old man is mine. Sasuke's eyes widened. Sharingan Tazuna and Sakura lifted themselves off the floor, alarmed and confused. Kakashi never backed down. He narrowed his eye, trying to identify the shinobi in front of him. Finally identifying him, he reached up for his forehead protector. Well, if it isn't Mamachi Zabuza, demon of the bloody mist, a rank missing nin. "Oh, so you've heard of me. Also nothing I can't handle," Kakashi said, giving the missing nin a one-eyed smile as he lifted up his protector, revealing his Sharingan eye. Zabuza's eyes narrowed in annoyance at the comment, "Surround and protect Tazuna. Do not enter the battle," the silver-haired shinobi called to his students from over his shoulder. Immediately Sakura did as she was told. Sasuke was a little slower as he did this, his mind on Kakashi's Sharingan eye, not quite sure what to make of it. Soon both genin were in front of a shaking Tazuna. "Ah, I already get to see the famous Sharingan. I'm honored." "So you should be, come." Faster than the normal eye could see, Zabuza shot out of his original position and disappeared, reappearing on the lake up ahead. The water unsettled and swirled around his legs. He kept his head down, his right hand in front of his chest. Only his index finger pointed up, touching the tip of his jaw, while his left hand was in the air. His all but his index and middle finger were down. He's releasing a high amount of chakra, Kakashi assessed. Ninpu hidden mist no jutsu. All too sudden, Zabuza seemed to disappear, and the area was suddenly enveloped in a thick mist. He disappeared. Sakura gasped out. She clenched the kunai in her hand tighter, eyes wide with alert. Sasuke kept his cool, examining his surroundings. All was quiet until Kakashi spoke his thoughts out loud, not only warning his students, but also reminding himself and them that he was not invincible. "You'll come after me first." Mamachi Zabuza is a member of the Hidden Mist. He was known as an expert in silent killing. "You don't even notice that you're dead. It's not like I can use my Sharingan perfectly. You guys be careful." All the while no one noticed their small bundle of sunshine joy was missing. Naruto hopped from tree to tree, a wide smile on his face, the soft wind blowing in his face as he rushed through the foliage. Concealing himself within the forest shelter, he snuck up behind a nearby figure, their hair tied into a tight bun, having part of the front of their hair frame their petite face, although it was covered by a strange-looking red and white mask with a mist symbol on top of it. Grabbing a kunai, he silently made his way towards the shinobi before quicker than the normal eye could see he had pulled out a kunai and pressed it against Haku's throat. Although not seen, Haku's eyes widened and froze completely. "Nah, missing nin kun want to make a deal?" the whisker mark child asked enthusiastically. Haku shook out of his stupor and calmed his nerves. Shinobi-san, I am not a missing nin. I am a hunter nin from the mist. He began, keeping his voice from shaking from fear of being caught. Ah, is that right? Naruto asked, a mocking edge to his voice. His features were upturned into an amused smile. Then why is it that you have not come down to help us? A group of genins being attacked ruthlessly by a dangerous A-rank missing nin, while their sensei is caught trapped in a water prison. You would think that help would come in such a hopeless situation. Shinobi-san, I would help, but unfortunately you are the one who is keeping me from doing so, Haku replied coolly. Naruto blinked, then grinned bashfully. He chuckled a bit. I guess I am letting go of the mail. Haku spun around, throwing a senbon aimed straight for Naruto's neck. Said blonde stood there watching passively as the senbon drew closer to hitting its target before swatting it away effortlessly. Haku's eyes widened, but before he could do anything else, the genin disappeared and reappeared behind Haku, kunai once again back in its original position. See, I told you, you were a missing nin, he said cheerfully, all the while smiling at Haku, who gritted his teeth. So how about you listen to my proposition? Meanwhile, the rest of Team 7 and Tazuna were in a dire situation as Sasuke and Sakura found themselves up against an A-rank missing nin's clone, and even though it was just a clone, it was still much more powerful than them. What was worse was, their sensei had made a rookie mistake and underestimated their enemy, as well as gotten himself captured, leaving their client wide open for the taking and his students for dead. And Sasuke still had no idea where the dope went. He quickly calculated the situation, unknown to him as did Sakura. Her eyes darted to Zabuza and the clone Zabuza in front of herself and Sasuke. Grasping her kunai tighter in her hand, she ignored Kakashi's shouts to flee. What kind of idiot was he? Even if they did flee, they would not be able to escape. They were up against a man who was a master at concealing himself, not to mention he had far surpassed them in speed. They would barely make it to the next tree before getting captured. Besides, those who break the rules and codes of the ninja world are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. A small glint passed through Sakura's eye. Both Kakashi and Zabuza saw it, but had no idea what it meant. Sakura channeled her chakra discreetly through her arm, ignoring Sasuke's shouts back to Kakashi and his short response to Tazuna. She blocked all sound out, just remembering what Naruto had taught her. Flashback no jutsu. No, you're doing it all wrong, Sakura. You need to concentrate and control how much chakra is needed. Because you have such small reserves, you need to be careful of how much chakra you put into your attack. You can't afford to use excess chakra. Sakura sighed in frustration. She had been at this for an hour. Naruto and Sasuke had came back from wherever the hell they went, and the blonde immediately pulled her to his side, and she found herself trying to completely crumble a boulder of all things to half its size. Hi, she panted. Naruto watched over her from a nearby tree. He watched as her face scrunched up in frustration. He saw the chakra being channeled through her arm. That's it, he thought, smiling. Sakura's eyes shot open, charging to the boulder. She threw her arm out in front of her. On contact, the boulder exploded, making shards of stone fly everywhere. Sakura was on the ground on all fours in front of the now half-destroyed boulder, panting. Naruto gave a light smile before it disappeared. Alright, since you destroyed that half of the boulder, I want you to destroy the other half as well. When you do that, go on to the next boulder and try to turn the whole thing to dust. Sakura gawked. Isn't this enough, she shouted, pointing at the boulder in front of her. Naruto shook his head. Do you think Sasuke is going to be impressed by boulder that was only half destroyed? Sakura turned quiet before a look of determination passed through her eyes. Naruto smiled again before disappearing. Alright, Naruto, how do you know? Sakura turned around to see nothing. Glancing around in all directions, she found she was alone. She sighed and turned back to the boulder once again. Then flashback no jutsu. Sakura looked directly into Zabuza's eyes and smirked. Catching the male off guard, she punched the ground, causing chunks of the earth's floor to be thrown into the air everywhere. The ground beneath them cracked. The crack continued through the sea floor towards the other side. The earth shook and vibrated while it moved, clashing with the other side, causing an enormous tsunami. Zabuza, not wanting to get in the way of the monstrous wave, fled away from the water's surface, effectively freeing Kakashi, who gathered Tazuna in his arms and jumped into the trees. Behind him, Sakura and a gawking Sasuke did the same. Peeking at Sasuke from the corner of her eye, she giggled, "Cha. Girl power rules." Forgetting for a moment that she had gotten this power from Naruto, Kakashi landed on a nearby branch and smiled at Sakura. Good job, although you did disobey my orders, but your punishment will come later. Sakura fumed. Sorry for not abandoning my comrades, she shouted, turning away. Kakashi gave her a one-eyed smile before doing a head count. Where's Naruto? Meanwhile, down underneath the foliage, concealed perfectly into his surroundings, Crimson Eyes continued to watch a young blonde male. Crimson Eyes with 3 Tomo continued to watch the blonde fox, amusement dancing like fire in them. The spinning orbs flickered over to the blonde's teammates, his eyes focusing on the raven-haired figure of the group. He would come again, but later. Now was not the time. Crimson Eyes disappeared, taking with it a soft breeze. Kakashi's ears pricked as he heard the rustle of foliage. Quickly guarding himself with a kunai, he turned to the source of the noise to find nothing. Searching around for good measure, he finally put the kunai away, looking back to his students, his expression serious. "Stay up here, do not enter the fight," Sakura snorted in an unladylike fashion, grumbling about ungrateful perverts. Kakashi gave her a one-eyed smile before disappearing from view. Both Sakura and Sasuke shifted their positions to get a better view of the battle occurring below, both oblivious to what was about to happen next. "So, do we have a deal?" Haku gritted his teeth. "Do I have a choice?" He thought sarcastically. "Of course you have a choice, missing Nin-kun. You just have to make the right one." The feminine shinobi's eyes widened. Had he spoken aloud? "Nope, your body language is just easy to read." Haku's eye twitched in annoyance at the cheerful blonde. He was too happy. Couldn't he be more serious in this type of situation? Sighing, the missing nin nodded in agreement. Naruto's grin got wider, letting his hand fall, and putting away the kunai he waved to the fake hunter nin. "Don't forget what you agreed to Haku-kun," before he disappeared into the foliage, leaving Haku crouching with his fists clenched, not quite sure where to go from there. Then he noticed it. "How does he know my name?" Meanwhile, Chibi Naruto was doing a little victory dance, waving his hands in the air while he turned around, shaking his body. Kyuubi watched with a sweat drop planted onto his forehead, yet again. He knew Ikami-sama was playing some twisted foul trick on him. He always said that the god had his head on backwards. He decided now would be the time to crush the Chibi's happy moment with the flaws Naruto had just created in his own plans. "Oi kid, you revealed the nin's name to him, you're not meant to know it." Naruto froze immediately, assuming the thinking position. He sat in the water-filled cavern. 3, 2, 1 In a flash, Naruto was bouncing up and down the walls in panic. All the while, Kyuubi watched the show in amusement before the great demon turned around and left the blonde to solve the problem on his own. "Ah. Kyuubi, you got to help me." The great demon didn't even stir. "Kyuubi," he whined, "nothing. I'll be your best friend." The great demon stopped breathing, stilling all movement as best as he possibly could, before sprinting to the furthest end of his cage out of sight, leaving Naruto pouting at the entrance. "Stupid mutated rabbit." A vein popped on top of the fox's head, but he did not reply. Sighing, the red and white clad boy opened his eyes. Peering into the clearing, he saw Zabuza and Kakashi in a headlock of jutsus. Looking further into the distance, he saw Tazuna, Sasuke and Sakura watching the battle from above. Not much further ahead, he saw Haku ready to strike. Naruto smiled. These were the good old days. If only things could stay like this, so simple. No wars or deaths. PFFT, what a dream world. Shaking his head to rid himself of his thoughts, he disappeared forward towards the tree where his teammate sat in hiding. He landed in front of Tazuna, who jumped back in shock, clutching his chest. Sasuke and Sakura, who were too engrossed in the battle, took no notice of the blonde who had just appeared behind them. Naruto peered at his sensei's battle from over his teammate's shoulders. If sensei doesn't be careful, he might get trapped in a water prison again. Sakura screamed with a jolt of shock. She unbalanced herself and went sailing over the edge of the branch. Sasuke jumped back, a kunai in hand. Naruto wasted no time and caught onto Sakura's hand, smiling down at the white-haired girl. Sasuke just muttered a curse at the blonde, while Sakura settled for trying to attack Naruto, who laughed it off, that is until Sakura whipped out a kunai. The weapon sailed through the air. Naruto just smiled as he dodged it, but the shift in weight unbalanced him. Uh-oh. Sakura's eyes went wide, along with Tazuna's and Sasuke's, as both blonde and strawberry blonde tumbled over the edge and landed with a rather loud thud on the earthen floor below. Rushing to the edge, Sasuke and Tazuna held their breath at the position Naruto and Sakura were in. Both their faces were extremely close to each other, their breaths mingled with one another's. Sakura's hands were placed on the floor on either side of Naruto's head, while the blonde's hands were on the girl's shoulders, stopping her from coming down on him further than she already had. Loose strands of hair came out of the messy bun and tickled Naruto's cheeks. The young shinobi jolted himself out of his stupor. Swallowing, he said in all seriousness, "Nah, Sakura, I'm flattered at the offer, really I am, but I don't go for flat-chested women." Sasuke and Tazuna fell feet up in the air, while Sakura went beet red in anger and embarrassment before pounding Naruto's head in the ground, literally, and stomped away. Recovering, Sasuke jumped down to inspect his teammate, who was now trying to get his head out of the ground. "You had that one coming." Naruto with one last push popped his head out of the ground, falling back on his behind. He grinned up at Sasuke, but it was worth every second. Sasuke smirked at his grinning and weird teammate. What are you guys doing?" All turned towards the newcomer, Kakashi sensei. Naruto bounced right up towards the ninja, jumping up and down in front of him, waving his hands in the air excitedly. "Did you beat him? Huh? Did you? Kakashi sweat dropped at his enthusiastic student. Hi, Sugoi. That's so cool." Kakashi smiled at his student before inspecting everyone else, seeing Tazuna climbing carefully down the tree, mumbling something about crazy shinobi. Sasuke was giving Naruto a summary of what happened while he was gone, and Sakura, she was looking down, poking her chest. She leaned on a nearby tree as depression lines appeared over her head. The Cyclops sighed. Why was it he was always stuck with the weird ones? Suddenly things got blurry. He swayed before falling face first towards the floor. The last thing he heard was his students shouting his name before everything went black. Kakashi woke up to unfamiliar surroundings. He immediately tensed up. "Ah, you're awake." Kakashi's head whipped around, and smiling young woman came into his vision. She carried a wet towel. Approaching him, she knelt down, taking the warm towel off of Kakashi's forehead and replaced it with the cold one. "You probably shouldn't move very much." Kakashi gave the woman a confused look. Seeing the look on his face, the female stuttered, realizing she hadn't introduced herself. "Woman, my name is Tsunami. I am Tazuna's daughter," Kakashi said, suddenly remembering that his client did indeed have a daughter and that they were probably at his house. Tsunami nodded, a warm smile spreading across her features. "I can't thank you enough for continuing on this mission," she said, bowing and showing quite a large amount of cleavage. "It's times like this that I can't help but love my job," Kakashi thought, suppressing a perverted giggle. "Ah." Tsunami shot up. For one horrifying moment Kakashi thought she had saw him peeking. "But then I almost forgot, you might be wondering where your students are, Kakashi-san." The scarecrow suppressed a groan. "Leave it to his cute students to ruin his fun," but he nodded all the same. Explaining that they were out the back training, Kakashi asked if they had anything that would be able to support him enough to walk. Looking hesitant, she warned Kakashi that he probably shouldn't move around too much again, but exited the room and came back with some crutches all the same. Smiling at her, Kakashi exited out to the back of the house and came face to face with a sight he really didn't expect to see. The backyard was indeed a sight to see. A large forest spread out across the landscape, while right next to it on the right was a magnificent large lake, its crystal surface shining in the summer's sun. The greenery of the place was a sight to see, but that's not what had shocked him. About a quarter within the deep lake was a knee-deep Sasuke trying to balance himself to get onto the surface, while Naruto was standing on the surface beside him, arms crossed, watching him with a stern look on his face. Smiling eerily, Naruto shouted out Sasuke's name. The raven jumped in shock and disrupted his chakra flow, plunging into the deep water. Surfacing, he spit a mouthful of water out. He glared at the laughing blonde above him before grasping his leg and pulling Naruto down beside him. Naruto yelped as he resurfaced, glaring at Sasuke. He splashed the raven with water soon. Both were in a very animated water fight involving the two, plunging each other's head under the surface. Kakashi sweat dropped at the sight before he turned to face his female student, who was engaged in a taijutsu fight against Naruto. As far as he knew, Naruto didn't know how to do a clone. His chakra supply was too high. Kakashi's eye widened as he looked closer. "Kagebushin," Kakashi sighed. "You're just full of surprises, aren't you?" Kakashi continued to mutter under his breath until he heard a loud bang, and the earth beneath him shook hard. Looking up, he found Naruto up mid-air, rocks flying around him, a smirk planted on his face, while Sakura was beneath him in a crater she had just made while trying to punch Naruto. Kakashi's jaw almost dislocated his jaw from how low it dropped. He sighed again. Too many surprises. He was going to die from a heart attack one day. Damn cute students. The Jounin made his presence known and called his students over, ushering them inside. Hot, sweaty and dripping wet, they all sat around the kitchen table. Kakashi calmly asked Naruto to bring in Tazuna and Tsunami in the kitchen because they needed to hear what he was about to say as well. After a few moments of silence, Naruto came back with both adults, all sat around the table waiting for Kakashi to start. Finally, sick of the pregnant silence, Naruto spoke up. "What's wrong, Sensei?" Kakashi smiled, as impatient as ever. Well, hunter nins usually dispose of the body of the person they killed right there." Sakura gave a confused look. "So, what?" Kakashi sighed. "No matter how much they improved physically, they only improved a little mentally. Don't you see? How did that masked boy dispose of Zabuza's body?" Sakura's brows furrowed, as did Tazuna's. Tsunami just looked lost. Sakura asked. "How should we know the masked boy took the body with him?" Kakashi's face turned into a grave one. "Yeah, if he needed proof of his work, he could have just taken the head. And the weapon he used to kill Zabuza." Sasuke's brows furrowed. Simple needles. Suddenly everything seemed to click as his eyes widened. "No way." Kakashi just nodded simply. Naruto gave a solemn look while everyone else was lost. "Yeah, exactly." Suddenly irritated, Tazuna burst out. "None too kindly, what are you guys talking about?" Pause for dramatic effect. Kakashi thought to himself, most likely Zabuza is alive. And cue shocked faces. Sakura and Tazuna did not disappoint him as their eyes became as large as saucers and their jaws dropped to the floor. How he loved these moments. Tsunami, however, was still wondering what they were talking about. What do you mean? You checked, didn't you?" Kakashi nodded. "Yeah, I did, but that was most likely a temporary death. The weapon the hunter nin used, unless it hits a vital organ, has a low probability of killing your opponent. It's an item used by doctors in acupuncture therapy. Hunter nins know about the body structure thoroughly. Putting a person in a momentary dead state is probably easy for them. First, he carried away the body of the much heavier Zabuza. Second, he used that weapon that has a low probability of killing. These 2 points indicate that his motive was not to kill Zabuza, but save him. We cannot ignore that possibility." Tazuna frowned at this. "Aren't you thinking too much?" Hunter nins are meant to kill missing nin. No, with all the suspicion we will prepare before it's too late. That's the shinobi rule. Besides, whether Zabuza is alive or not, there's no assurances that Gato hasn't hired an even stronger shinobi, Kakashi added with a smile, completely decapitating the heavy aura that had just surrounded them in the near-hopeless situation. All face faulted at his carefree attitude, Kakashi giggled at his desired reaction, something then clicked in Sakura as she frowned. Kakashi-sensei, what do you mean prepare before it's too late? You can barely move. Kakashi smiled at her. What fun it was to be young and ignorant, he giggled, gaining even more confusion from the young female. He means he's going to train us. Sakura whipped around to Naruto, who spoke as did Sasuke before they turned to their still smiling sensei, as if to confirm, yep. Sensei, what do you mean train? What's a little training going to do for us, with an opponent that even you struggled against with the Sharingan? Are you trying to get us killed? Sakura screamed. Sakura, who saved me while I was struggling. You guys are improving rapidly, Kakashi smiled down at the three. But obviously this is just training until I get better, you won't be able to defeat him without me. All ignored Kakashi's suddenly 180-degree turn on the "you guys are improving rapidly" speech he just said. Sakura frowned, but sensei, if Zabuza is alive, he could attack at any time, so should we be training? About that, a person put in a momentary death situation should take a while before their body returns to normal. So we train until then, Sasuke muttered. Naruto grinned. Alright, sounds like fun. That's not fun. A small boy around the age of 6 or 7 suddenly entered the kitchen. Naruto frowned as he suddenly remembered, damn, I forgot about Anari. Oh. Anari. Where were you? Tazuna suddenly shouted, arms stretched out, welcoming his grandchild to a comforting hug. Welcome back, Grandpa, he said, pausing only to take off his sandals and overcome the big step in front of him. Before going and hugging Tazuna, Tsunami frowned and scolded him in a mother-like fashion. Anari, say hello to these people, they are the shinobi who protected Grandpa. Anari peered out from his hug with his grandpa to look at the 4 shinobi. Untangling himself from his grandpa, he pointed at the 4 before saying, Mom, they're all going to die, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Kakashi sweat dropped, Sasuke frowned, Sakura looked up in shock, and Naruto looked on solemnly, his arms crossed and leaning back in the chair. There's no way you can win against Gato. No one spoke. A heavy silence lingered in the air. If you don't want to die, you should leave, Naruto smirked. The FFT, like we'll lose to someone like Gato, he said. Anari frowned. Someone like you won't ever be able to beat Gato. You're all going to die. Anari. His mother scolded. It's true, he turned back to the shinobi. There's no point in trying to do anything, you're just going to die anyway. Naruto gazed directly into the child's eyes, unfazed. Didn't you hear me? I said you're all going to die, so just leave. Tsunami moved to calm him until Naruto spoke again. Isn't it better to die protecting something precious than to die cry like a baby? Anari's fists tightened at his sides before he ran out the door. Naruto stood up and went to the back door. Naruto, where are you going? Kakashi asked silently, tightening his fist on the handle. He replied calmly, to train before disappearing from sight. Kakashi gave a mock smile before saying enthusiastically, well, that was interesting. Don't you think? Everyone sweat dropped at the jounin. Suddenly the jounin froze and then smiled at Sakura. Sakura, your hair is pink again. The female's eyebrow twitched before she bashed Kakashi's head. Be more serious, will you? At night, Naruto lay in his futon gazing at the ceiling, waiting for his sensei and teammate to fall into a deep slumber, all the while thinking about what to do with Anari. Maybe he should just leave the situation to play out like last time. It certainly worked, although last time around he was a little rough on the kid. Meh, whatever, it was the kid's fault. Kyuubi sweat dropped. The blonde was 25 and he still thought like a 12-year-old. The blonde peered over at the 2 shinobi and smiled. Getting up, he revealed he was fully clothed and armed. Gathering the rest of his weapons, he disappeared out the window and into the night straight towards Gato's hideout. Upon arriving, he easily dodged all the mercenaries and genin level missing nin. Circulating the area, he peered through all the room, hoping to find his desired one. He stopped as he found a light protruding out of one. Carefully peering through it, he came just in time to see Haku break Gato's arm. The short man howled in pain before stumbling back. After some commotion, the 2 samurais at his side and Gato left the room. Inside, Naruto was dancing with maracas in his hands, chanting, go Haku, it's your birthday, we're going to party like it's your birthday, woot woot. Humming himself, he didn't catch on to the short conversation that Haku and Zabuza had. Becoming part of the shadows, he slid into the room, sticking to the ceiling. Everything was quiet. Finally getting fed up with the silence, Naruto plopped down onto the floor. Haku tensed faster, then the eye could see he was behind Naruto with a senbon at his throat. Naruto smiled. Haku-san, you know that won't work, he said before he disappeared and reappeared beside Zabuza. Haku's eyes went wide. So did you tell him? Naruto asked, jabbing his thumb at the missing nin beside him. Haku slowly shook his head. Naruto sighed irritably. So what are you waiting for? Looking back at a curious-looking Zabuza, he stated simply, I want to make a deal. I've already informed him. Naruto pointed behind him at Haku, who was gritting his teeth. How do you know my name? Haku asked. Naruto inwardly cursed but turned all the same, it's not like you're not that well known, you're the one that helps Zabuza when he's in trouble, that's why he's survived for so long. Well, the cover story was decent, Kyuubi thought. But Haku accepted it after a few moments of mulling it over. Turning back to Zabuza, Naruto smiled down at him. So here's what I was thinking, you guys leave Gato, and I'll pay you double what he's paying you, which is pretty good, considering he wasn't going to pay you anyway. Plus on top of that I'll be able, if you want, to get you into Konoha free of charge, as full-fledged ninjas. Naruto finished off. Both sweat dropped at the kid's bluntness. Zabuza frowned. This was a one-way deal, what the hell do you get out of this brat? Naruto smiled. No enemies to deal with and a whole load of training time. Zabuza and Haku sweat dropped again. And if you don't keep this deal? Zabuza asked. Then I give you permission to kill me on the spot, Naruto said cheerfully. Haku sweat dropped. Why is he so happy? Zabuza mulled the thought over before nodding. Naruto smiled widely. Okay, so, here's the plan. Naruto plopped down on the futon, his head buried in the pillow. Oddly, he wasn't sleepy, just tired. Searching around, he decided to go through his belongings. Halfway through his weaponry he came across something odd. Feathers? And what the hell is this? He asked himself, then something clicked. Oh yeah, we were meant to do that prank. Naruto looked between the two substances and Sasuke, then to Kakashi, and smiled eerily. Prodding the raven awake, Sasuke was on full alert, but then relaxed when he saw Naruto. He glared at the blonde about to ask him what he was doing when Naruto held up the two objects in each hand. Prank time was all he said. Sasuke smirked. Early that morning, Sasuke and Naruto purposely slept in late, waiting for their sensei to wake up. After Kakashi had woken up, showered, and dressed, Sasuke and Naruto were getting more and more irritated, waiting for the time when Kakashi would exit the door, sealing his own fate. The Jounin stretched and went over to the door. Both genin peered out of the corner of their eyes, holding back their snickers, that is until Kakashi-sensei. Sakura. Both thought, shooting up, they went to stop the girl, but it was too late. She opened the door before getting hit by a greenish-brown sticky foul-smelling substance. Immediately afterwards, another bucket spilled and fish gut spilled out and hit her dead on. She stumbled back. Don't, Sakura. Both Naruto and Sasuke called, but again they were too late as mounds of feathers came down on her. She looked just about ready to cry before a sticky golden substance oozed out of another bucket onto her head, before slowly traveling down her body, turning the once white feathers yellow. All in all, she looked like a very big chicken who had rolled around in shit before jumping into a river of dead fish, and smelt like it too. Sasuke and Naruto, although remorseful, couldn't keep in their laughter. They gasped for air, while Kakashi stood there sending sympathetic looks towards the girl, before turning towards his other students and giving them stern looks. You two outside now. Naruto and Sasuke immediately stopped their laughter and bowed their head in shame. Picking themselves off of the floor, they made their way out the door. Bending down so he was eye level with Sakura, Kakashi said, I'll go get Tsunami so we can clean you up, K. Sakura nodded meekly, tears still streaming down her face. Then he added in a small whisper, then after that we'll get them back, before exiting the room, leaving a confused Sakura behind. It was only a few moments later that she gave a sly smile. Meanwhile, outside, Naruto and Sasuke stood next to each other, waiting for their punishment from the Jounin in front of them. You guys are in so much trouble. A young pink-haired female lay sitting on a veranda of a relatively large house, watching two young yet handsome males pulling weeds under the glaring sun, sweat gleaming in the sun over their bare backs. The pink-haired girl was sitting idly with a content smile on her face, fiddling with a straw in one hand and a glass of orange juice in the other. Sasuke and Naruto grumbled as they pulled the weeds out. This was just like doing D-ranked missions all over again. Damn Sakura and her feelings, why did she have to have emotions anyway? It's not like it would change anything in her if she didn't. Naruto paused his thoughts as he pictured a female sigh. Shuddering, he went back to pulling out weeds. Never mind. The blonde was pulled out of his thoughts by his raven-haired teammate. This is all your fault, he sulked, although he would never admit he was sulking. Really, what kind of a Uchiha would he be if he sulked? My fault? How is this my fault? I didn't ask Sakura to ruin the prank, although it was pretty funny. Sasuke nodded in agreement. You're right, this is all Sakura's fault. Yeah, look at her sitting over there, mocking us. Yeah, let's kill her. Okay. What are you two doing? Sasuke and Naruto jumped a mile from fright, swiveling on the spot. They came face to face with a suspicious-looking Kakashi. Nothing. We weren't plotting a pink-haired girl's death. Naruto exclaimed. Not at all. You can't prove anything. Sasuke cried out right after the bundle of sunshine. Kakashi sweat dropped right. A heavy silence was brought upon the three shinobi. Anyway, you guys are free to go, the Cyclops continued, his nose already buried into his little orange novel. Both males turned to look at Kakashi in surprise. But that's it, that's all we had to do? Naruto asked, a little confused. He thought Sakura would have surely used this to her advantage to get back at Naruto for all he had done. Well, what she thought he did. Kakashi shrugged, still not looking up from his book as he flipped the page. That's what I said, but she went on, skipping into the house, giggling about something that sounded like shirtless, hot, sweaty, Boys in the Sun and a ton of pictures to sell on eBay, the Jounin explained as he giggled into his novel. Both Sasuke and Naruto paled considerably, not noticing Kakashi already walking back to the house. Shocked out of their stupor, Naruto and Sasuke ran after Kakashi, pleading and threatening him to tell them where Sakura was. The scarecrow laughed off their cries of help as he entered the house. Sasuke and Naruto were left standing on the veranda of their client's house, a soft breeze blowing through them as they stared at the shut door. "Can we kill her now?" Sasuke asked in a monotone. Naruto paused before answering yeah. Both disappeared from sight, leaving only the trailing wind behind. Of course, when they had said kill, they only meant socially and emotionally. They would never hurt a comrade physically. Yes, Sakura was in for one hell of a ride when she got back to Konoha. Of course, she would never know until the last second. The poor girl would never know what hit her until it was too late. Sasuke and Naruto had just finished planning their revenge before Kakashi walked into the room. Both genin actions stopped, their eyes focused in the silver-haired Cyclops who had just entered the room and now felt extremely uncomfortable at being examined so closely. Clearing his throat, he said in a low, uncomfortable voice, you two have first watch tomorrow at the bridge, I'll go now." Walking out of the room, he turned to see Sasuke and Naruto still staring at him intensely. Closing the door with a quiet click, he stood on the other side, not quite sure what to do with himself, before he went downstairs to read some more of his little orange novel. Meanwhile, back inside, well, presuming that there is such a thing, he added the last comment quietly through bouts of laughter. Sasuke regarded the other team quietly before shaking his head. Nah, it's more fun this way. Naruto's face split into a mischievous grin. Laying back down next to his teammate, he said, "You know, if this keeps up, you'll be my new partner in crime in no time." The Raven turned his head, surprise dancing in his features. Before smirking and holding out his hand, Naruto looked at it blankly before his face burst into a grin once more as Sasuke said these few words, "It'll be a pleasure doing business with you." Taking the other's hand, Naruto shook it firmly. But Naruto halted his actions. "You still need to teach me water walking first." Naruto howled in laughter at the scowling Uchiha sitting next to him. Later that night, Naruto lay gazing at ceiling. The house was peaceful and silent, all in a deep slumber. Thinking back on the past few days, Naruto smiled, promising himself that this time would be different, way different. This time no one would get hurt, this time no one would die, because this time he knew what to expect, this time he will save everyone from their expected fates. Naruto vowed silently, his fist clenched in front of his face. Suddenly he stopped as a chakra signal disrupted the cool air, but as quickly as it had come, it disappeared again. Slowly, as to not wake his comrades, he lifted himself from his futon and glanced out of the window behind him. The same chakra signal disrupted the flow of the night's air. Immediately on his feet, Naruto silently and as quickly as possible was full clothed and armed. He made his way towards the window, only to be held back by a vice grip on his arm. Spinning on the balls of his feet, he aimed a good punch to the face of his captor. Skillfully dodging the punch, Kakashi calmed his student down before anything major happened. Surprised, Naruto cursed himself. How had Kakashi woken up? He made sure to be quiet. As if reading his mind, Kakashi gave his student a blatant look. "I'm an ex-Anbu captain, Naruto," he whispered, offended. Naruto sweat dropped, apologizing, unconsciously noting the Cyclops was fully dressed and armed himself. But then again, he's always on guard, Naruto told himself as he suddenly remembered the future nights he would spend with his sensei away on missions. That made no sense whatsoever. Kakashi's features suddenly tightened, indicating he was serious. "Where are you off to in the middle of the night with all of that?" he asked, pointing to the armory and heavy explosives the young blonde held. But before he could reply, another chakra signal was distributed into the night. The silver-haired Jounin froze and gave a curious glance towards his student, who glanced anxiously towards the window. Kakashi spun the boy around. "What's going on?" His voice was firm and crisp, leaving no room for arguments. Naruto sighed. "I'll explain later, follow if you must, but by no means are you to interfere in this," Naruto hissed in urgency as another signal was given off. Kakashi nodded and followed Naruto as he disappeared out of the window, trailing his student by a few good meters away. Entering the forest, they traveled further into the thickening foliage. Naruto slowed his pace before coming to a complete stop and jumping down from the treetops. Kakashi followed his student and blanched as he saw who was responsible for the chakra signals. Itachi, Zabuza and the fake hunter nin. Naruto, what the hell is going on? The three missing nin surveyed the Cyclops before turning and aiming their confusion at the blonde, who was now pinching his nose at the predicament he had in front of him. "Kakashi-sensei, I've told you of Itachi before, have I not?" he asked calmly. Kakashi turned to his student questioningly before a clog in his mind seemed to click back into place as he remembered Naruto briefly telling about Itachi's innocence during his detailed explanation of how he was from the future. Kakashi nodded before loosening up little, although he was keeping a rather watchful eye on Itachi, who seemed not to notice, and if he did not let it show. "Alright, what about the other two?" Kakashi asked, indicating Zabuza and Haku. Naruto sighed, turning towards the three missing nin, the Raven, Haku and Zabuza all waited for an explanation. Maybe you should all take a seat. This is a long story. Itachi raised a brow. Kakashi was already sitting knowing what to expect. The older Uchiha followed his lead and seated himself on the ground in front of the small blonde. Zabuza said he would prefer to stand while Haku took his place under the male's feet. Naruto sighed again. This was going to be a long night. A heavy silence loomed over the five shinobi, all deep in thought before Zabuza broke the silence. So let me get this straight, you're from the future, right? Naruto nodded. And you came back thanks to Kyuubi, the demon that was sealed inside of you when you were born by your Yondaime Hokage, who also happens to be your father, to save the village. Haku continued. The ultimate reason you came back was to stop the destruction that Konoha had fallen into by the hands of my foolish little brother and his pink-haired fangirl. Itachi asked before thinking again and bluntly asking in disbelief, does he really kill me? Yeah, I was surprised when I found out too, Naruto answered. Kakashi, Zabuza and Haku sweat dropped at the lack of normality of the conversation. Kakashi suddenly scratched the back of his head, bashfully turning to Haku. Sorry about the whole killing thing. Haku looked confused for a moment before waving his arms in front of him. No, it wasn't your fault at all. I was the one who jumped in front of Zabuza-sama. Kakashi insisted that it was his fault, and Haku kept reassuring him that it wasn't, laughing nervously. Itachi and Zabuza were in a deep discussion and heated argument about whose death was more honorable. All the while Naruto was on the sidelines, watching the scene unfold with a sweat drop planted on his head. This turned out rather well. Naruto nodded mentally, before realizing Kyuubi. Everyone's actions immediately halted, all weapons drawn out and instantly on guard searching for the demon. But then looked at Naruto confused, said blonde was covering his mouth with one hand and scratching his head sheepishly with the other, laughing nervously. He waved all of them off. Haha, Gomen. My mistake. Itachi seemed to make the connection first. You can talk to the demon. Naruto laughed nervously again. Pshh. No, he scoffed. What would make you think like that? Naruto stopped halfway through his denial as he realized that everyone had already found out and that denying it would not help them think otherwise. Yeah, I can talk to him. Kakashi sighed. Is there anything else I don't know? He asked, crossing his arms and tapping his foot impatiently. Naruto pouted. He looked away as he started tugging and fiddling with his shirt under Kakashi's intense glare. The three missing nin watched the scene with amusement. Zabu-kun and Haku-chan, Itachi and Kakashi held back an amused smile. Zabuza settled for a glare at the nickname, while Haku blushed. I made a deal with them that they would come back to Konoha with us and be reinstated as full-fledged ninjas, the blonde said innocently as he pointed at the pair. Kakashi blanched again. The Mist Nin and his companion chuckled at the blonde's innocence and Kakashi's reaction. And so will Ida-chan, the blonde continued. Itachi, ignoring the new nickname which Zabuza took it upon himself to burst out laughing at it, while Haku settled for a giggle, looked at the blonde in shock. He hadn't heard about this. Kakashi, however, did not find anything amusing. Naruto, his voice halted any if not all actions and noise that echoed around the forest. Naruto flinched under his gaze, tightening his hold on his shirt. When exactly were you planning to tell me this? Naruto flinched again at the harshness of his voice. Naruto, not trusting his voice, looked away from Kakashi. Naruto, you know we can't. All three missing nin turned to Kakashi. Haku flinched as he remembered the deal, sneaking a worried glance at the blonde and then at his master. But Kaka-chan. Naruto protested, but immediately backed down after seeing Kakashi's expression. Just a little hint for all the slow people out there, his expression isn't a happy one. Sighing, the blonde sat on the floor. I can make it happen, he said quietly, yet it was heard so clearly in the forest that was now dead silent. I can have them reinstated. Well, in their case, he pointed at Zabuza and Haku and stated, I have a few connections and I can pull a few strings. I can make it happen. Kakashi, just trust me, please. Naruto let his azure eyes wander to the silver-haired Cyclops, who in turn sighed. Why did I pass this team again? He asked Naruto, who gave him a grin. Because you know you can't live without your cute but precious students, he replied simply. Kakashi scoffed. Haku felt Zabuza's tense body loosen up next to him. He also found himself letting out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Itachi let a rare but small smile grace his features at the thought of returning home. But of course Itachi won't be able to return until next year, and Zabuza and Haku must be under the highest form of henge to enter the village, Naruto said simply. Everyone stopped and stared at Naruto, who was fidgeting awkwardly with the hem of his shirt, looking anywhere but the four before him. Haku sighed. What exactly are you planning, Izama? Naruto, just Naruto. Naruto-kun, what are you planning? Haku asked quietly. Naruto sighed. To put it simply, I'm planning to put together a secret operative team of high-class ninjas, which will help me keep an eye on things outside Konoha and within it, as well as go on the occasional missions here and there, Naruto said, and adding casually, with the Hokage's permission. Of course, everyone's jaws dropped. Well, except for Itachi, but you could see the disbelief in his eyes at the ridiculous idea. Naruto chuckled at their reactions. It's not as ridiculous as it sounds, Naruto said, but no one responded. The blonde sighed. Well, it's a good thing you all trust me, otherwise we'd be in big trouble, Naruto said with a laugh. 4 out of 5 blanched. Naruto stopped chuckling. You guys do trust me, don't you? Again no one responded. Guys, Naruto called out meekly. Inside Naruto's mind Kyuubi howled with laughter. Naruto took it upon himself to curl into a ball near a tree, with anime tears running down his cheeks and heavy depression lines hovering above him. The blonde cried about people not trusting him. Haku rushed to the boy's side trying to calm him down, a sweat drop planted on his head. The other 3 had their backs turned from the scene, discussing why they wouldn't trust the boy. As soon as Naruto's head hit the pillow he fell into a deep sleep. Kakashi watched the boy with a fond smile on his face. In the end Naruto had somehow once again managed to get them all to trust him with what he was proposing to do. Shaking himself out of his thoughts, Kakashi found himself collapsing onto his pillow. Not realizing how tired he had actually been, he found himself already in a deep slumber, thinking about the surprises tomorrow will bring. It seemed as soon as he fell asleep he was woken up again by a loud banging at his door. Sensei. Naruto. Sasuke-kun. Tazuna-san said he'll meet you at the bridge. Sakura's voice called from the hallway. Kakashi groaned. He heard Naruto and Sasuke groan along with him. He lifted his sleepy head from his pillow and yawned before scratching his head and moving towards the bathroom. Meanwhile Naruto and Sasuke were both still groaning about the sun being too bright and Sakura being too cheerful so early in the morning. This went on until Kakashi exited the bathroom completely refreshed and Naruto got up from his futon and entered the bathroom, locking the door behind him. He quickly brushed his teeth and showered. Exiting the shower he pulled the towel around his waist before dully noting that he had not taken any clothes in with him. Sighing he made sure the towel around his waist would not fall off before exiting the bathroom and made his way towards his cloak, which had all his sealing scrolls. Sasuke and Kakashi raised a brow at Naruto's appearance. The blonde offered a short "forgot my cloths" as an explanation, which the raven sleepily accepted, while the scarecrow went back to whatever he was doing. Gathering his clothes Naruto made to stand up but was pushed back to the floor as Sasuke, who was accidentally knocked down by Kakashi, landed on top of him. Sasuke had landed on his hands and knees, both hands on either side of the blonde's head, while his left leg was placed in between Naruto's legs and his right leg, just brushing the blonde's left leg, while Naruto's other leg was bent so that the sole of his foot was flat on the ground. His knee was brushing the younger Uchiha's side. All 3 males froze. Naruto and Sasuke's lips were just centimeters away from each other, not to mention the fact that Naruto was completely and utterly naked under the towel, which wasn't doing a very good job of covering him right now. Everything was silent before Naruto groaned. Damn it, Sasuke, I know I'm attractive, but couldn't you wait until after Kakashi was out of the room? Or were you waiting for a threesome? Sasuke blushed crimson before smashing Naruto's head through the floor, getting up and stomping off into the bathroom. Releasing his head from the floor Naruto turned around to hear and see the sight of Kakashi on the floor laughing. Naruto gave the Cyclops a grin before forgetting about shame and drying himself off, as well as dressing himself right in front of his Jounin sensei, although Kakashi didn't seem to mind, let alone notice. Once fully dressed Naruto turned to face Kakashi with a grin on his face. So, what are we doing today? The work site was buzzing with activity and full of life. A series of orders were shouted at the employees over all the clatter and clamor of the construction happening in the surroundings. 2 males stood side by side together on the far side of the incomplete bridge. The male on the right had his hands folded behind his wild golden hair. He looked up at the sky watching the clouds drifting by. While the male on the left had his arms folded across his chest watching the employees scrambling around the bridge, hurrying to get to their destinations, rushing to get the job done. Sasuke had a passive expression fixed into his features, using all his strength and focus on ignoring the blonde next to him. Said blonde had noticed the older boy's odd behavior and got curious, then annoyed. This had been going on since they had left the house, and Naruto was getting frustrated. Tilting his head he leaned down a bit to get a better look at the raven's face. Noticing the action Sasuke turned away completely, giving Naruto a full view of his back. A vein popped on the blonde's head, his brow twitched uncontrollably as he continued to stare at Sasuke's back. What's wrong with you? You've been like this since we left Tazuna's house. The older male didn't so much as twitch, let alone acknowledge his existence. Naruto fumed as another vein popped into place next to the first one. The blonde had enough. He made to grab the other's shoulder in order to make the boy face him, but the raven had beaten him to it. Naruto suddenly found himself breaking out a sweat as he gazed into Sasuke's glare, which would freeze even the core of the earth. Yes, if looks could kill, Naruto would already have been beaten. Left for dead, then brought back to life only to be cloned, have his clones beaten and then killed along with himself, and the being left to rot below the 7 levels of hell, where even the bravest of demons would not dare venture. Letting go of Sasuke's shoulder like touching him had burned through his hand, he put both hands out before him, using them to act as a shield between himself and the glaring thing he was facing. Backing away ever so slowly he said, Leaf. Shoulder. Take. I'll go over there now." Naruto rushed over towards the other side of the bridge, leaning over the rail he gasped, searching for the breath that was knocked out of him from Sasuke's killing intent. Glancing back at the teen he found his teammate engulfed in flames of fury, the sheer killer intent rolling off of him in waves was enough to set the employees in a state of frenzy. Some scampered away from the teen, others shook struggling to breath trying to get away from the crazed teen, while others stood back and watched in awe at the young genin. What is with him? It's like it's that time of the month already, oh my god. Sasuke's a pmsing girl that gets it twice as hard as normal girls. Are you really that stupid? And here I thought you had grown that thing you call a brain. It seems I was mistaken. Naruto jumped at the familiar sound of the demon's voice. He chuckled nervously at the glaring raven who gave him a curious glance before reverting back to trying to glare a hole through his head. What do you mean? What did I do? Kyuubi chuckled before continuing. I love it how you instantly assume that you have done something wrong, and what I mean is that the Uchiha doesn't appreciate what's happened between you and him this morning. Naruto stood before the beast and its cage, a blank and confused expression on his face. The fox demon fought down the urge to hit his forehead with his paw. What happened this morning? Not being able to stop himself, Kyuubi smacked his forehead, glancing down at the oblivious young male before him, before sending him into his recent memory. Flashback no jutsu. Naruto and Sasuke's lips were just centimeters away from each other, not to mention the fact that Naruto was completely and utterly naked under the towel, which wasn't doing a very good job of covering him right now. Everything was silent before Naruto groaned. "Damn it, Sasuke, I know I'm attractive, but couldn't you wait until after Kakashi was out of the room? Or were you waiting for a threesome?" Sasuke blushed crimson before smashing Naruto's head through the floor, getting up and stomping off into the bathroom. Then flashback no jutsu. "Oh, you can't be serious, he's getting worked up over something as little as this. I mean, I would understand if Sakura had reacted this way, but Sasuke, I'm disappointed. I for one, thought he would be better than this is. Kid, look at this from his perspective. Not only did you humiliate him in front of his Jounin sensei and make him blush, most likely humiliating him further, but you also have to take into account that the Uchiha had the pride and ego is thrice the size of the Hokage monument. And for you to go and do something like this is one thing that a person brought up believing in all the Uchiha beliefs and learning their customs cannot tolerate." Naruto mulled over the fox's words, slowly he nodded his head understanding. "So then what should I do?" Kyuubi gave him a blunt look. "How the hell should I know?" Naruto gawked at the demon before him, the blonde chibi rose to his feet pointing at Kyuubi as he shouted. "What do you mean you don't know? Aren't you helping me?" Kyuubi howled and roared in laughter, his voice echoing away into the darkness. However, the deep rumbles ceased as the fox saw the seriousness on the blonde's features, his expression softened. "You're serious?" Naruto nodded. "Well, in that case." Kyuubi rolled on the floor of the cavern howling in laughter harder than before, beating his paw on the ground, causing water to wash over Chibi Naruto, whose brow twitched, popping a vein. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Stupid mutated rabbit." Silence lingered in the atmosphere of the construction site, all eyes turned and landed on the poor blonde boy who was blushing crimson at his own stupidity. A breeze blew by as the silence continued. Inside his cave, Kyuubi rolled howling and gasping for breath, trying to keep his gut from bursting because of all the laughter, mentally cursing the fox with every swear he knew. Naruto cleared his throat and laughed nervously. I think it's time for lunch." Sasuke and Tazuna sweat dropped at the obvious cover-up. "TCH, that idiot, no one would fall for that," Sasuke muttered, crossing his arms in front of his chest. Tazuna nodded in agreement but stopped midway as he saw his workers following the young blonde towards a resting area on the bridge, all the while they took out their lunches. Both Sasuke and Tazuna face vaulted, regaining their composure. The raven turned to the older man and said bluntly, "Your workers are a herd of idiots. What did I ever do to deserve that?" Tazuna's eyes widened before he turned away with a small blush on his features. He moved his hand in front of his mouth, clearing his throat. "Never mind." Sasuke raised a brow, a small sweat drop on the back of his head. Sighing, he made his way over to his blonde teammate. Meanwhile, Naruto congratulated himself on his awesome cover-up story. Not only did he get out of an extremely uncomfortable situation, but he also got to eat lunch earlier too. Yeah, he was a true genius. "Hey genius, why not tell me what you were trying to cover up?" Freezing, Naruto broke out a sweat as the recognizable voice of a cocky raven floated to the side of his ears. Turning ever so slowly, he faced the familiar features of his black-haired teammate. "What do you mean, Sasuke? Not only did I get out of an extremely uncomfortable situation, I also got a free lunch out of it. I'm a genius." "Is what you just said, so what were you trying to cover up?" Sasuke asked, crossing his arms. "Oh, for fuck's sake. Didn't I already get out of the habit of speaking my thoughts?" "Apparently not, dope. Start talking." Fucking bullocks. Glancing at his teammate one more time, he ran through every possible excuse that didn't lead to a dead end. Sighing, he slumped in defeat as his tiny brain could not capture an excuse he could have used. Compassing himself, he folded his arms across his chest and looked directly into Sasuke's onyx eyes. "Sasuke, what I am about to tell you, you must not breath word to for the rest of your days until I say otherwise." His facial expression serious, calm, composed, one of authority. And definitely a facial expression that caught Sasuke's attention. Giving Naruto a wary look, he nodded firmly. Naruto only sighed once more before looking at Sasuke, and then his face dropped into a mixture of horror and disbelief. He shouted while pointing behind the raven, "Oh my god. It's Itachi." Needless to say, Sasuke turned so fast he could have gotten whiplash. His eye twitched, however. Now when Naruto cried out Itachi's name, he wasn't lying entirely. The older raven was in the area just not behind Sasuke, and it was towards Itachi's exact location that he was currently heading. Zooming past the trees, he jumped on the heavily hooded figure before him and engulfed him into a bear hug. "Ida-chan." The cheerful blonde suddenly found a kunai to his throat in mere milliseconds. "Naruto-kun, I'm forever grateful to what you've done for me so far, however, please refrain from ever doing that again, otherwise I will have your head as a decoration for my wall." Naruto glanced blankly at the kunai before looking at Itachi and back again. The blonde's face fell into one that would have looked like a toddler being deprived of his favorite toy. He sent the look straight at Itachi, who kept his cool. He had enough practice with his little brother. Ignoring this look was like a second nature to him still. Naruto, noticing this, pouted before releasing the older male. "Nah, you're no fun, Ida-chan." The Uchiha snorted. Before putting away the kunai, Naruto seated himself under the shade of a nearby tree. He folded his hands behind his head and turned expectantly at Itachi. "So what have you called me out for?" Itachi considered the blonde, his face giving away nothing. His eyes, however, gave away his uncertainty. The genin raised a brow. "Akatsuki is making its move to infiltrate all Jinchuriki." A silence rang out throughout the forest. Naruto's face upturned into a frown. Sitting up straight, he linked his hands in front of his face, resting his elbows on top of his crossed legs. "They're moving earlier than expected." Itachi only nodded stiffly, watching the blonde with interest. Shaking himself out of his trance, Naruto shot a grin at Itachi. "I've still got time, plus we got you on our side right now, so it won't be as much a problem as in the original timeline." "No." Naruto turned confused. "I have not been assigned to go after the Kyuubi no Yoko Jinchuriki. Deidara and Sasori will be going after you." "Hisam and I have been assigned to go after the Ichibi no Shukaku Jinchuriki." Itachi nodded at Naruto's confused state. He himself was confused. Naruto rummaged his thoughts trying to think up a solution to this, yet stopped midway. This was actually turning out better than planned. "Keep it that way." Itachi turned more confused than ever. "What? Keep hunting Shukaku, just don't hurt or capture him. I'll also be able to keep the other Jinchuriki away from the rest of the Akatsuki members. I'll be able to take care of Sasori and Deidara." Naruto chuckled. "I'll show them the art of pranks, those two won't know what hit them." Itachi sweat dropped as he watched Naruto laughing at his own little fantasies. Clearing his throat, he caught the blonde's attention, who stopped and stared blankly. "What are you still here for? Hurry up and skedaddle, I'm a busy person, you know." Itachi sweat dropped again, finding it quite ironic that he, the man that massacred one of the most prestigious clans in the shinobi world in less than one night, was taking orders from a genin. Sighing, he pondered what happened to the world when the little gold of sunshine entered the world. The older raven nodded before turning to head off. "Wait. I've been meaning to ask you something." Itachi turned, waiting questioningly, and face vaulted at the sight of the blonde, who lifted rocks, searched behind and uprooted trees, looking through bushes, all the while asking Ida-chan, "Where is Shark-chan?" Itachi was trying to recompose himself after he face vaulted. Glancing towards the blonde, who was still searching, he shook his head and said in an utterly defeated tone, "He's 5 miles from here under the influence of Tsukiyomi. Although it's wearing off and taking its toll on my body, I need to go." Naruto nodded, understanding. This could prove to be a problem in the future. If Akatsuki caught on to Itachi's overuse of his Mangekyo Sharingan, then they would start to get suspicious, and a suspicious powerful underground missing nin organization poking around into his business was the last thing he needed. He was going to have to find a solution for this problem. He gave one last nod and goodbye to Itachi before he made his way towards Tazuna's house. His shift wasn't over, but if Akatsuki was moving faster, then he would need to be prepared for any other changes in the timeline. Sakura was going to get one hell of a training session. He wasn't letting her go until she mastered everything he had planned for her. That way, when he got back to Konoha, she would have already mastered the basics and more, so all he would have to do is get someone to push her into everything else. Then it was straight on to Sasuke and water walking. After that, he was going to hand him over to the scarecrow and make sure that he drills him to the ground, pride or no pride. It was finally time to get serious. But first, he really needed to prank someone, and he could see a silver lining in the distance. Naruto lay deep in thought. Contrary to what he had told Itachi, this was going to be troublesome. While he could ensure Gaara's safety, he would need a new strategy now that Deidara and Sasori were going after him. He would need to know when they would strike, defenses, attack plans, battle moves, he needed information and fast. It was a good thing he knew exactly who to go to for it. Smirking, the blonde took out a scroll, scribbled a quick note, he preformed a few hand seals, and slammed his head down onto the parchment before sealing it, and summoned a clone to take it to his sensei. When the clone had taken off, Naruto, smiling, stood up, stretched out the kinks in his arms and shoulders, patted off the dust from his pants, and moved on towards the far side of the village. In a second he disappeared from view and was exiting the village and was on his way towards Kusagakure, where Orochimaru was rumored to be sighted. With a malicious smirk fixated on his features, Naruto started humming a random tune, not being able to contain his excitement for what he had planned for the next few days of when he found the snake Sannin. This was going to be fun. Perverted giggle. Lanza training progress. Read R-rated dreams. Perverted giggle. This was the continuous cycle Kakashi had conducted for this afternoon while training Sakura. Naruto had already taught her of the chakra control exercises. From what he had heard from the blonde boy, she completed them excellently, but then dully noted that it was because of the puny chakra reserves she had. Naruto had ordered him to train the strawberry blonde and raise her chakra reserves. Kakashi scoffed at the thought. How did a genin get away with ordering a ex-Anbu captain, now turned jounin? Oh, right, because said genin was really a 25-year-old Hokage from the future. Fuck my life, I'm too old for this shit. The silver-haired jounin was brought out of his self-pity by the reason and cause of said self-pity. Lifting his head from the little orange novel in his hand, he let his gaze wander over to the hyperactive blonde-haired person, grinning in front of him, waiting. Why was he waiting? It was only a few seconds later that the ex-Anbu captain noticed the scroll in the boy's outstretched hands. Raising his visible brow, he carefully took the scroll from the boy and opened the parchment to read its contents, only to be sprayed by a jet of water that came gushing out of the scroll. The water slowed before stopping completely, droplets of water dripped from the edge of the scroll. Kakashi blinked, still grasping the parchment. His hair now flopped onto his features, drenched was his mask and forehead protector. The silver cyclops glared at the laughing blob that was the blonde. Sakura, who had noticed what was happening, promptly burst into fits of laughter, gasping out how her sensei could be as stupid as to fall for something so simple. Holding back a growl, his visible eye twitched, barking orders at Sakura to get on with her training. The girl yelped before complying. Kakashi turned back to the blonde male, only to find him gone and replaced by a puff of smoke. The Jebushin. Sighing, he glanced down at the sheet of paper. He blinked in surprise to find that there was writing on it. Aka-chan, I'm disappointed, you're making pranking you too easy. You're getting old, Cyclops. Anyway, getting back to business, guess who won't be around for a couple of days? Come on, guess, here's a clue, we both know him, and he's your most favorite student in the whole wide world. You dare say Sasuke-n'll beat you into the middle of next week? That's right. It's me. As for where and why I am going away, well, I can't tell you that in case this message get infiltrated. So see you when I see you. Hey J91, 1. Kakashi's eye twitched again. Cyclops, who did his brat think he was, he pushed the thought to the back of his mind, he'll think of a punishment later. Right now he needed to find out what the gaki thought he was doing going off on his own. Kakashi sighed, unsure of where to go from here. Turning back to glance at Sakura's training progress, he blinked when he saw nothing. Alarmed, Kakashi turned wildly looking for the pink-haired ninja. He froze when he heard a female clearing her throat from behind him. Slowly as he dared, he turned to face his pink-haired student. He blinked again as he noticed it was only a Bushin. He blinked 2 more times when he found her waiting patiently for him to take a scroll she had, he assumed, been holding out to him for a while. Hesitantly taking the scroll, Kakashi was in full battle mode, not taking another chance after what happened with Naruto's scroll. He quickly preformed a jutsu, wiping any pranks which may have been in the scroll. However, upon finding nothing, Kakashi relaxed visibly and gave a one-eyed smile. Really, he was being paranoid as to even suspect Sakura, he thought as he opened the scroll and read the contents. Dear Sensei, sorry for not sticking around, but you wouldn't reply when I called you. I finished the exercise just fine. I'll be waiting for my next lesson, insert smiley face. Your favorite student, odd n plus or minus, 2. Kakashi gave another one-eyed smile at the innocence of his female student. He blinked as he realized there was more. P.S. You let your guard down. I'm disappointed in you, Sensei. I even gave you a clue that I'm not so innocent. Kakashi blanched as a wave of itching powder smacked right onto his face and mask. Growling, Kakashi swore to get revenge on his students. Meanwhile, in Tazuna's backyard on top of the lake was Sasuke. He had taken Naruto's advice and summoned a Bushin to spar with him on the surface of the water, like he had seen Kakashi do with Zabuza. So far he could keep a constant flow of chakra for little over 15 minutes while sparring, and while his sensei said that was a great achievement, he knew he could do better and was still training. His thoughts wandered over to the other day when he saw one of Naruto's clones train Sakura, making her harness the super strength she had and put it into combat. Curiosity getting the better of him, he asked Naruto why he taught Sakura that strength and not him. Flashback no jutsu. Naruto looked at Sasuke mildly surprised at the question, before his surprise melted into a grin and stated simply, because Sasuke team, that style doesn't suit you, although you would be able to harness the technique in time, you will not be able to master it on the same level that Sakura can. It takes immense amounts of chakra control to be able to master that technique, and while you have excellent control, Sakura's control is still better due to her low chakra reserves, making her chakra output easier to control and more sufficient for this particular style. Sasuke mulled the thought over a little before nodding, still looking unconvinced. Seeing this, the blonde continued. Besides, loud and destructive isn't your style, you're fast and silent. It's a useful talent to improve, as most assassins look to be quick and silent. So working to improve your stealth would be something you should do. And if you do take this advice, you can also look for a fighting style with grace, I guess you would say. For example, using the katana. Well, Kakashi Sensei isn't skilled in that art, you could always ask to be introduced to one who is. I think there are a few samurais in Konoha who could take you on as an apprentice. That is if you want to. Anyway, we're going to be late to meet up with Kakashi Sensei and Sakura. Come on team. Naruto exclaimed as he ran towards their meeting area. Sasuke followed, all the while thinking back on the new information he had just processed. Unknown to him, Naruto snickered, his plan going smoothly, although he was still surprised that Sasuke had been the one to approach him directly this time. All well, better for him. Then flashback no jutsu. Sasuke dodged a punch from his clone before a thought crossed his mind, how does the dobe know all this? Before he lost his concentration and plunged into the icy lake. Surfacing, a tick appeared on top of his head in irritation while his clone above him smirked in triumph. The tick grew bigger, are clones even able to contain personalities? Whatever, and he dispersed the clone before exiting the lake and moving towards the house for a shower. When he exited the shower, he met Sakura, who had a pleased expression on her face. Lifting a brow at her, she simply went around happily helping Tsunami prepare dinner. Putting his curiosity towards the back of his mind, he collected a scroll from his room and sat on an armchair across from where Tazuna was studying the blueprints of the bridge. Anari was sitting in his grandfather's lap listening to the man's mummers and mumbles to himself. It was little under an hour before Kakashi entered the house in a foul mood, glaring at an innocent-looking Sakura, and announced that Naruto would be away for a week. Sasuke and Sakura looked up from what they were doing and asked simultaneously, "Why?" Kakashi looked at his two students immediately, noticing the differences from when they first introduced themselves on the rooftop all those months ago. Sakura would have blushed at the mere thought of saying the same thing as Sasuke had, let alone at the same time. Well, Sasuke wouldn't have spoken up in the first place, he wouldn't have shown even the slightest interest in his teammate. Kakashi gave them both a one-eyed smile. They were growing up, probably from Naruto's training, but no one else knew that. Kakashi answered them with a simple, he had to take care of something personal while he was here. Hokage-sama had given him permission and warned me beforehand. Now the last part involving the Hokage was a complete lie. He honestly didn't know what Naruto was doing and only prayed he didn't get himself killed. He didn't want to fill out any more paperwork than necessary, it would be too troublesome. It seemed, however, that Sakura and Sasuke bought his lie and went back to what they were doing. Kakashi blinked. What was it that simple? No questions, no complaints, no how come that Baka is out on his own and I'm stuck in here. Kakashi scratched the back of his head. Well, it wasn't like he was going to complain. Moving over to Tsunami, he asked if there was anything she wanted him to do. Under the cover of darkness, Naruto took solace in the forest surroundings and made camp. Building his tent and laying out his futon. That done, he made 5 shadow clones, 2 to search the area for any potential enemies, another 1 to gather sticks and stone to make a campfire, while the last 2 were to hunt for food. While he waited for his shadow clones to either disperse or return, Naruto busied himself and made a perimeter around the camp that would alert him immediately if anyone entered it. It was little under 10 minutes before one of his clones came back with the materials for the fire, aligning the stones and piling the sticks on top of each other. He got the fire started within seconds. The rest of the night went on uneventfully and Naruto soon fell asleep in his camp. It wouldn't be until 2 days later that he would reach his destination and stumble upon Orochimaru's lair. Kakashi snapped awake as he heard a rustle and a pulse of a familiar chakra signature from outside the house. Carefully he peeked over at his still sleeping student and gathered the rest of his weapons before exiting the house. Making his way towards the chakra signature, he caught sight of Zabuza and Haku. Stopping in front of, he turned his attention to a confused Haku who spoke up. "Where's Naruto-kun?" Kakashi gave a one-eyed smile. Naruto-kun had to take care of some personal matters, he won't be here for another week unfortunately. Haku looked a little downcast before nodding. Zabuza rolled his eyes at the boy's antics and spoke to Kakashi. "He's been rambling on and on about that blonde, you'd think he had an infatuation with the boy." Haku's eyes widened and his face turned crimson. Zabuza-sama. Kakashi simply chuckled. You wouldn't be the first one he's done that to, Haku-san. A silver-haired jounin stated, thinking back to the Hokage's grandson, Konohamaru. Zabuza lifted a brow while Haku's blush deepened. Shaking his head, Zabuza spoke up. Gatu is moving. He is planning on having us. He pointed at himself and the young nin next to him. Attack the bridge at the end of this week. Kakashi's features turned grim. That gives us 4 days. Zabuza nodded before continuing. He plans on sending out 2 samurai to take the daughter hostage as well. I am unsure of what he plans to do with the boy. Kakashi nodded, accepting the new information and mulling over his thought before looking at Zabuza, who was studying him, and asked, what are your thoughts on raids? Zabuza gave the other jounin a malicious grin that promised pain. Kakashi returned the grin. Haku looked between the 2 jounin and slowly back away. This is bad. Naruto-kun, hurry back. 2 days later, time skip people. Naruto could be found crawling along a dark vent looking for his target. After a few minutes he found him. The tall pasty-skinned snake Sannin was sitting in his study, looking through a few assorted files. Smirking, Naruto drew back the way he came and dropped into the corridor outside the man's office. Taking a tag out of one of his pouches, he stuck it onto the wall opposite the door and entered the vent once more. He hurriedly made his way back to his previous position above Orochimaru and then activated the seal. A loud explosion sounded throughout the corridor. Orochimaru shot up and exited the room out into the chaos of confused ninjas. Naruto, as quick as the yellow flash himself, entered the room and set up his trap before hurriedly entering the vent once more. A few minutes later, when the excitement died down, Orochimaru came storming back in and sat back down, all the while hissing curses of frustration about incompetent ninjas. And then the trap activated and globs of glue splattered all over the Sannin's head before a bright rainbow-colored afro wig floated down on top of the glue, effectively sticking it to his head. The Sannin was too shocked to register the soft click of the digital camera Naruto had taken a picture with. The blonde desperately held back his laughter in fear of being caught. Calmly and still somewhat shocked, the Sannin stood up, setting off the other trap set in place, and got hit with gallons of paint, one color after another. When the assault finished, Naruto took another couple of pictures, and then Orochimaru did something Naruto would never have thought possible. The bastard fainted. Naruto looked on for a couple more seconds before going crazy and took a dozen pictures before collected every shred of evidence that even suggested that he had been there and exited the lair and ran back to his team. All the while he laughed and laughed and laughed. Meanwhile, back with Kakashi stood within the forest with Sakura and Sasuke helping them with their training. Sakura was once again trying to completely master her technique and was working on her ninjutsu at the same time, while Sasuke asked Kakashi to help him improve his speed. Needless to say, Kakashi, not wanting to pass up a good opportunity, worked Sasuke to the bone every day, and slowly but surely he could see the boy's efforts coming through. The jounin had informed the 2 genins of the raid to take place the next day, and both immediately disagreed, something that shocked Kakashi greatly. When he asked why, they simply stated that they didn't feel they were ready. Again, this took Kakashi aback. If the statement came from Sakura only, then he would understand, but it came from Sasuke as well. Kakashi simply smiled at both of them and told them he wouldn't have dared suggested it if he didn't think they were not ready. This seemed to calm them down if only a bit and nodded in acceptance. Sakura, however, was still a little wary. Sasuke then asked about Naruto and if he would be back in time. Kakashi shook his head and said he wasn't sure. Sasuke again nodded before returning to the backyard to train. Kakashi turned to his students in front of him, a proud smile upon his features. They were thinking a little more like a team. That night, Tazuna's family and Team 7 were all gathered around the table chatting and eating happily until something caught Sakura's eye. Tsunami-san, the woman, turned her attention to Sakura and smiled. Why is that picture ripped? Tazuna, who had been happily talking animatedly to Kakashi, suddenly stopped upon Sakura's words. Tsunami's face fell, and Anari suddenly stood up and ran out of the room. Everything was still and Sakura found herself stumbling with her words, apologizing for intruding. Tsunami simply shook her head and started explaining everything that had happened with Anari's father. By the end of the explanation, everyone was silent for the rest of the night and immediately went to bed after dinner. Naruto sat in his camp watching Itachi, who was sitting across from him. The older male had warned Naruto that Akatsuki was planning to move in on Gaara much earlier than expected. When are you expected to move? Leader Sama has given Kisame and I 2 more days to move. Naruto nodded. Is there any way to delay the capture? Itachi looked thoughtful for a second before nodding. For how long? As long as you can. I need a minimum of 3 months after the Chunin exams coming up. Itachi nodded before getting up and leaving the amp before anyone back at base noticed his disappearance. Naruto sat in deep thought before sighing and retiring to his tent. Time skip. The night of the raid. Sasuke adjusted his small headset, hearing the crackle of Kakashi's voice come over it. They were all in position, however he and Sakura were both a bit doubtful of the 2 new allies Kakashi had suddenly introduced. While their sensei had assured them that the raid wasn't a trap and that Zabuza and Haku had truly switched sides, Sasuke still wasn't assured and was on higher alert than before. As soon as Kakashi gave them the signal to move in, Sasuke shot out of the shrubbery and with a few quick motions, cut the throats of the guards, allowing his team and their 2 allies access. Giving a quick nod to Kakashi, he disappeared out of view and went to perimeter the area, taking care of any enemy along the way. The other three shinobi and one kunoichi entered the building. Haku, Sakura and Zabuza immediately went for the stairs while Kakashi started the slaughter on the ground floor. Sakura went over the map she made mentally and drew her way towards Gatu's office where she would take care of him while Haku covered her on the third floor. Zabuza had taken the second floor. She saw Haku cover her from the corner of her eye as she made her way down the corridor of the third floor. She dodged a slash made at her and cut off the man's arm. The male screamed in agony before she slashed his throat and moved on. She forced a bile that rose in her throat back down. It wasn't the time for this, she could brood all she wanted later. She wondered how Sasuke was handling all of this. Said Raven had long finished his part of the mission and was now kneeling down at the base of a tree, emptying his stomach of its contents. He had decided he really didn't like killing. Glancing down at his bloodied hands, he sat back and idly wondered how Itachi was able to do it. He had killed them all, and it didn't seem to affect him at all. Sasuke was barely able to handle killing someone he didn't know, and yet Itachi was able to kill his entire family and be fine with it. Sasuke was confused and slightly angry, something he was tired of being. Was he really able to kill Itachi? Sasuke got rid of those thoughts, not now, he needed to focus on the mission now. Standing up, he did a quick fire jutsu to get rid of the mess in front of him and made his way inside to help his teammates. Kakashi finished off the mercenaries on his floor and was now gathering information and documents sealed inside various rooms. He was about to enter another room when he saw a bloodied Sasuke walk through the entrance. The silver-haired man grimaced at the sight of the boy, although Kakashi will admit he was impressed at how Sasuke was holding up. He greeted his student with a one-eyed smile. The boy raised a brow at his sensei as he gave the man a once-over. Staring blankly at his student, Kakashi looked down at himself as well and noticed he was covered in blood and gore as well and had just waved at said boy like there was nothing wrong. Needless to say, Kakashi's sweat dropped and Sasuke rolled his eyes at his sensei's absentmindedness and went on to ask he needed him to do anything. Zabuza cursed, this floor was useless, there was hardly more than 80,562 yen in here. Shaking his head in disgust, Zabuza thought, and these people call themselves mercenaries, before he moved into the next room. Haku and Sakura had finished with their floor without too much difficulty and were now making their way downstairs, all the while making idle chit-chat. Haku was surprised that the girl was handling taking another life so well. When the boy voiced his thoughts, Sakura looked downcast and shook her head, saying she just wasn't thinking about it. Giving her an remorseful look, he apologized. She shook her head and said she would have to face it sometime and gave him a determined smile, which he returned. When they all got back together, they exchanged experiences and made their way back towards Tazuna's house, who nearly had a heart attack at the sight of Zabuza and the fake hunter Nin, until Kakashi calmed them down and told them they were now allies. At the same time, Naruto had just returned to the village and immediately continued his way away from the main road and onto a less familiar route away from the poverty and into the less occupied streets of the village. Graffiti infested the walls of the dark alleyway Naruto calmly entered. Reaching the end of the alleyway, the boy was met with the sight of dozens of other shops. However, unlike the ones on the main streets, these held dark objects. The place was gloomier than others even at night. Naruto crinkled his nose as a familiar nasty stench hit his senses. Waving the smell off, Naruto continued his way down the familiar narrow road into a small shop. The shop held immense amounts of explosives and all sorts of weaponry. Naruto smirked, it was just as he remembered. The blonde made his way through to the front of the shop and placed a nearby wooden chair in front of the counter so that the back of the chair faced the counter before sitting down and leaning onto the counter, staring at the bleached blonde man behind it. "Hello, Haruma-san." The other blonde male simply raised a brow at the boy in front of him, narrowing his eyes. He blew a bubble with his gum before it popped. Both blondes surveyed each other. The tension in the shop increased dramatically. Both males kept each other's gaze. Naruto looked over the man and grinned when he saw that after all these years back, nothing about the man had changed. He had the same bleached hair, 2 silver hoops in his pointed ear, his teeth were still as sharp as ever. Naruto held back a shudder. He always wondered how the male had gotten them as sharp as he did. The male had pale skin, almost more so than Sasuke. Naruto grinned at the man, who narrowed his eyes. "Get out of the fucking shop if you're not going to buy anything. Fucking pipsqueak." Naruto's grin, if possible, grew wider before he replied, "I heard you were the one to go to if you needed any specific battle requirements." The man called Haruma narrowed his eyes and blowing his gum until its pop resounded around the empty shop. "Depends on what I get in return." Fucking pipsqueak. Naruto flashed him a sly grin and waved multiple pictures in front of the man's face. Haruma stopped chewing before, for the first time in weeks, he grinned maliciously, showing his large pointed teeth. The younger blonde said simply, "I heard you were lacking with blackmail against Orochimaru." Graciously taking the photographs from his hands, the older male surveyed them for a while before turning to the younger blonde and asking, "So what do you want, fucking fox?" Naruto grinned once more. Let the games begin. Naruto grinned at the other blonde as he went through his plans for the upcoming years. Haruma was calmly listening to the younger male, his gaze betraying nothing that went on in his mind. Silently mulling over the thought of allying himself with the genin and weighed out the pros and cons of the situation. Alright fucking Kitsune, I'll cooperate, but I expect more of this, he said, pointing to the photos. At least every 2 months. Naruto smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way, Haruma-san. Haruma smiled maliciously. Well then fucking Kitsune, follow me and don't dawdle. Naruto grinned. It was good to be back. Following the taller man behind the counter and through a door to the side, down a heap of stairs and into the cellar, the sight that greeted him was one he had not seen in years. Memories bombarded him of people who had died in the war. Glancing around the room of familiar faces, he picked out the faces in the crowd and spotted the smallest one, Kabayakawa's Sina. He remembered the boy was around his own age now. Well, physically speaking, the boy was known to be the perfect target for a bully. Sina had a good heart, but the boy was so jumpy that he squeaked at the sight of his own shadow. Naruto still remembered the day he had met him and decided to help the boy at least attempt to stand up for himself and teach him a bit of defense. The fact that the boy was fast definitely helped. By the time Naruto was through with him, Sina had become as fast as Guy and was as determined as himself. The boy was no pushover, yet he had lost him to the war when he was sent on a mission along with Yamato and 2 other Anbu to infiltrate Kusagakure. Naruto had sent them out to find out how many ships were coming through with weaponry, food, as well as other goods. With that they would have been able to estimate the amount of shinobi they were up against, their defenses and how to possibly counter them, as well as the conditions the enemy would be in and how it would affect their performance. The mission was going smoothly until Yamato tripped a wire and set off a trap. Sina moved before anyone had registered what happened and ended up getting gravely injured. The team raced back towards Konohagakure as fast as they could. Sina was admitted into the hospital. However, by that time, the boy's body had taken too much damage and had lost too much blood, and they were not able to save him. The mission had been a success and would have been one of the main reasons for the victory of the war if Sakura had not interfered. However, it came with a cost. The loss hit Naruto hard and was deeply angered by the fact that he wasn't able to properly mourn the loss. He turned to another familiar face, slightly reddish hair, tall and curved, holding that same broom in her hand and the familiar mother hen type attitude. Naruto held back a wide smile as the face of Momori turned to face him. Momori was another he had lost in the war. Although she was never on the battlefield, she did her part by helping to take care of the children that had lost their parents at the time. The girl lived longer than Sina, and from what Naruto had gathered from the time spent with her, she was very much like a surrogate older sister to the boy during the time he was alive. The girl would beat off all threats that had been directed at the boy. Naruto remembered that when she had found out about his teaching Sina, the girl nearly blew her top off. It took them hours to calm her down enough to talk to her rationally. In the end they had sorted out the disagreement, but not without any scars. It was the first time in all his years as Hokage that he actually felt threatened. When Naruto first heard the news of Sina's death, his heart broke not only because he had lost another friend, but for the girl who spent years upon years practically raising the boy. The girl who loved him to his very core. He remembered he barely contained the tears at the mere thought of having to break the news to Momori. When he explained to her what had happened, Naruto felt his eyes tear as he watched the young woman. She had stood and stared at him, shocked and barely able to process what was happening. She hadn't even realized the tears that poured down her cheeks. Naruto watched her as she collapsed, still staring him in the eyes, and then he saw something that he knew would forever remain engraved in his heart as a constant reminder of all those who had sacrificed themselves for the village. He watched as her eyes dulled a little, losing their usual light. The happiness that was once there was gone, replaced with an empty void of hopelessness and despair. However, what the worst part of telling her was the fact that for one brief moment, and although she denied it countless number of times, he saw a look of betrayal flash through her eyes. At that moment, Naruto fully understood what was expected of anyone wanting to be Hokage. It was at that point that he vowed he would never let anyone walk through the doors of his office and leave with the same look Momori had in her eyes, and yet he had still failed. Naruto savagely pushed those thoughts to the back of his mind. Things would be different this time around, he promised himself. Looking back around the room, he noticed Argon there as well. The male still had his nasty temper and long dreadlocks and was possibly as fast as Sina, or at least on par with him. Argon glared at Naruto as his eyes fell on him. Naruto blanched at the familiar expression. It was the type that said Naruto was going to have to prove he was a piece of trash and that he was worth something. Naruto went through hell trying to prove himself to the man last time, almost gotten himself killed at the same time. He held back a sigh at that. Argon left during the middle of the war. His business took itself elsewhere, where there was less destruction and plentiful business. If he wanted to, Argon could have involved himself in the war. Naruto did not doubt for a second that the man would have been a great asset to have on their side, but Argon had a strict every man for himself type attitude. For that he did not involve himself and lived a plentiful life, which Naruto was happy to see him do during his time in the future. Tearing his eyes away from him, Naruto tuned into Haruma's introduction of everyone in the room. Of course Naruto already knew, but decided to listen to the man all the same as to not look like he knew too much. The genin noticed that many of the original members were not present. He hoped they were all alive and well, and had not been affected by him coming and changing the past. So fucking Kitsune, what weapons do you need? Naruto grinned. It was good to be back. Kakashi cursed colorfully, Sakura looked around worriedly, sweat dripped from Sasuke's brow, Haku kept his face down, but the crease in his brow gave him away. Zabuza looked around with a passive face, a drop of sweat making its way down the man's cheek. Each one of them were glaring at one thing. Tazuna. Another full house. Read 'em and weep, idiots. Ha. And you call yourself ninja. Tazuna continued to laugh and boast of his own awesomeness, completely unaware of the 10 eyes which were attempting to glare a very large hole through the bridge builder's head. Zabuza growled and turned to the copycat ninja. Aren't you meant to be the Sharingan Kakashi? What the hell happened to that psychic thing of yours? Kakashi glared at the man, a growl of his own erupting from his throat. Shut it, fish face, he spat back. The two glared at each other as Haku and Sakura attempted to get the shinobi to calm down. A day had passed since the raid, and the mission was once again passing smoothly. The bridge's progress, although slower from when Naruto was able to summon his clones, was still coming along nicely. Kakashi was beginning to get nervous at Naruto's disappearance. The boy was late, he was meant to arrive sometime this morning. If the blonde didn't hurry, Sasuke and Sakura, who were already giving him questioning glances, would start asking questions. As if Naruto had heard his thoughts and decided to grant him his wish, he burst through the door, startling everyone with his boisterous shout of "Kaka-sensei, I'm back. So did you miss me?" Kakashi regained his bearings and gave a one-eyed smile at his cute student. He held back a laugh as Tazuna grumbled and cursed the blonde to oblivion while picking himself up from where he had fallen off the chair in shock. Zabuza had a malicious grin on his face as he watched the old man, taking comfort in the fact that he had been humiliated. After all, no one was meant to beat him in poker, no one. Sasuke looked on, trying to seem disinterested and bored. However, he was not able to keep the smug smirk hidden as he watched Tazuna. He too, like Zabuza, had found the bridge builder's situation highly amusing. Sakura and Haku were more worried about the man than they were satisfied, although inner Sakura was cursing a storm, screaming that the man deserved everything he got. Naruto. Welcome back, how was the mission? Naruto's grin got wider at the question. It was great. I even took pictures. Wanna see? Kakashi smiled questioningly at the boy but not at all the same. Naruto grinned and bounced over to him, taking the pictures out of his cloak. Holding them up as though he were holding cards, he thrust them in front of Kakashi's face. The silver-haired man, who had taken a sip of water, sprayed it back out and choked at the photos in front of him. Naruto burst out laughing at the man's reaction. Zabuza, having gotten curious, looked over the blonde's shoulder and gawked. Are these real? He voiced his thoughts, still looking on in disbelief. Yep. And I even made copies. I really think I outdo myself sometimes. Naruto exclaimed happily, looking proudly at the photographs in his hands. The pictures consisted of many different women in different sceneries, all in very, very sensual poses, and all revealing much more than what was necessary and were wearing less clothing than the day they were born. Uzumaki. Naruto, where the hell did you find a place to take pictures like this? No, forget that. Are those photographs even legal? Did you even get consent? Naruto turned nervously to face a fuming Kakashi, leaving Zabuza to quietly gawk at the pictures. The genin laughed nervously. Aw, come on sensei, you know I go to these kinds of places, and of course they're legal. Geez, just because you haven't gotten any lately doesn't mean you have to come in and ruin my fun, Naruto said with a pout. Zabuza threw his head back and barked with laughter. Sakura seemed at a loss for words, but her horrified features spoke volumes. Haku blushed so hard it put Hinata to shame. Tazuna ended up choking on air before rushing to Zabuza's side and peeking in with a man, blood dribbling down his nose. Sasuke cocked his head to the side, seemingly interested with the turn of events. Naruto really knew how to stir up a household. Naruto. Kakashi growled dangerously, a shadow coming over his face as he glared at the blonde. Said blonde glared back at his sensei before he sighed and said in a disappointed tone that sounded very much like a child would after being scolded. I knew you'd be angry. He lowered his head, the glare slipping off his features. Everyone looked surprised at this, except Kakashi, who continued to stare in disapproval. But Naruto wasn't finished. Taking something out of his cloak once more, he exclaimed happily, that's why I got you the new Icha volume. It's complete with special features, pictures, and has sneak peeks into the next volume after this one. Kakashi's visible eye widened as he stared at the long-awaited novel and snatched it away from his now grinning student. He held the book in front of him with shaky hands before turning to face his student, a smile on his features, and said in a cheerful tone, remember not to flaunt next time. Before he ran upstairs intent on reading his new novel. Naruto grinned at his accomplishment. And that, kids, is how you avoid getting into trouble. Before he snatched his pictures away from the two other perverted men and skipped over to one of the available couches. It was only then that he took a good look at things and found Zabuza and Haku in the room, and no one was freaking out. Naruto looked at the two men blankly, the men returned the gesture, and after a few seconds the blonde cocked his head to one side and asked quite simply, Haku, Zabuza, what are you two doing here? Everyone in the room face vaulted to the floor, Naruto just grinned. 2 days later, dumb people, that means time skip. Cell 7 could be found in Tazuna's backyard training. Sakura was training with a clone Naruto, who was instructing her in being able to better harness her power. The clone mentally noted that the female needed to strengthen her reserves. The girl had only been training for 15 minutes, and although he knew that the past 15 minutes were no walk in the park, he knew that neither was being a kunoichi. The more advantage she had over the enemy the better. Shinobi naturally tended to underestimate female ninjas, and for this fact, Naruto was actually thankful on Sakura's behalf. For it meant that if Sakura lifted her reserves and trained hard enough to last longer as well as have better control over her new power, Shinobi would literally never know what hit them. Although, now, she is no pushover for a genin, it still never hurt to be prepared. Anything was possible, for example the upcoming war. Nodding to himself, Naruto barked another order to the pink-haired kunoichi, who glared in return before complying. Over on the lake, Naruto was watching Sasuke fight with one of his, Sasuke's, own clones, while trying to balance on the surface of the liquid. Naruto watched happily as Sasuke tore through his expectations and was breaking very little sweat. The blonde was sure that by the time they returned to Konoha, they would be more than ready to be able to face the Chunin exams. The upcoming war, however, was a different matter. No, they still had a long way to go before they could go up against Asuna and Sound Nin. Naruto was suddenly torn from his thoughts when he felt a very faint pulse come from the distance. The chakra signature was becoming very familiar to him. Itachi was here. Making sure no one was watching, Naruto left a clone in his place and discreetly slipped into the surrounding shadows of the forest and swiftly and silently made his way towards his ally. Upon reaching his destination, Naruto looked on with confusion. Itachi was standing with an impassive look on his face, however, his posture was radiating annoyance. Ida-chan. Is there a problem? Itachi gave a slow nod. Akatsuki has gotten suspicious of my sudden disappearances. Unfortunately, I will not be able to meet you for a while. I have already put myself at risk to deliver this message to you. Naruto nodded in understanding, his face devoid of any of his usual cheerful behavior. How long will this go on? Itachi thought for a moment before replying. A year, they will lessen their suspicion after. Then Naruto frowned. A year was too long, too much could happen within the organization, and he would never know. Is there a form of communication we can use to contact each other? One that is not traceable. Itachi took another moment to think. There is a way, however it is taxing on my eyesight. Naruto shook his head. Nothing that makes you any blinder than you already are, Itachi, he said sternly. Itachi raised a brow delicately at the blonde-haired genin's tone. Is there any other way? Itachi shook his head. Naruto sighed, denying heatedly there must be. Itachi's eyes shone with amusement at the blonde's reaction. Catching the glint in the other's eye, the younger male asked in annoyance, what's so funny? Ignoring the blonde's question, Itachi explained his thoughts. Naruto-kun, my eyesight is already damaged severely from my constant overuse of the Sharingan, a consequence I had overlooked.